Hey friends, glad you're here at Bald Voldemort. We've cooked up something special. What if Harry was the son of Anubis and every death curse made him stronger? Liking and subscribing really helps us out. Okay, story time. Chapter 1, The Scales of Mourning. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Not by owl, which was strange enough. It came on a breath of dry desert wind that had no business being in Little Winging, Surrey, in the middle of a grey English summer. It slipped under the front door of number 4 Privet Drive at precisely 3 in the morning, while the Dursleys slept and Harry lay awake on the thin mattress in his cupboard, listening to the house settle. Been dreaming again. The same dream he'd had since he could remember. A vast dark space that wasn't frightening so much as enormous. The way the ocean feels when you're very small and standing at its edge. There was always a set of scales in the dream, ancient gold balanced on nothing, and beside them a figure too tall and too still to be entirely human, wrapped in linen wrappings and shadow, with the head of a black jackal that turned toward Harry with something that wasn't quite a smile but wasn't quite not. Harry always woke up feeling steady, grounded, like he'd been reminded of something important that he couldn't quite remember while awake. The letter smelled like dry stone and something warm underneath, like sun-baked sand. Harry read it 3 times in the dark of his cupboard, using the thin strip of streetlight that leaked under the door. The ink was black and very fine. His name on the envelope was written in a hand that didn't look entirely like it belonged to this century. He smiled, folded it carefully, and went back to sleep. He didn't tell the Dursleys. There was no point. Uncle Vernon found the letter 2 days later while searching Harry's cupboard for reasons Vernon never fully articulated, reasons that usually ended with Harry spending a day without meals and when a spectacular shade of purple, then a remarkable shade of white. He put the letter down very carefully on the kitchen table, the way you'd put down something that had bitten you and didn't mention it again. Aunt Petunia saw it and pressed her lips together until they disappeared entirely. Dudley picked it up, read the first line, and dropped it like it was hot. Harry ate his breakfast, watching them over his toast. He had Vernon's eyes. That particular shade of green wasn't from Lily or from James, though nobody alive knew that yet, and right now those eyes were quietly, pleasantly attentive in a way that made all 3 Dursleys find reasons to be in other rooms. He was used to strange things happening around him. He was used to being strange. Animals had always watched him with too much attention. The cat that lived 3 doors down used to follow him to school and wait outside, which the teachers found unsettling. Flies never landed on him. When he was 7, a boy named Malcolm had shoved him off a wall hard enough to split skin, and Harry had landed on his feet in a crouch he hadn't planned and looked up at Malcolm with an expression that had made Malcolm cry without quite knowing why. Death didn't frighten Harry. He'd worked this out very young, the way you work out that you're good at sums or bad at drawing. Other children were afraid of the dark or of things under their beds or of dying, and Harry had examined each of these fears with genuine curiosity and found that none of them fit him. The dark felt familiar. Things under beds were just things, and dying was, well, it was a door. He'd always known that, the same way he knew his own name. The letter said he was a wizard. Harry had thought, yes, probably. Getting to London required stealing £20 from the jar Vernon kept in the kitchen for takeaway, which Harry did without guilt and with precise, efficient timing. Getting to the leaky cauldron required asking a cab driver, who after one look at Harry's address, the amount of luggage he didn't have, and the expression on his face decided to take the fare without asking questions. Diagon Alley was extraordinary. Harry walked through it slowly, hands in his pockets, turning his head at the wanmaker's window and the apothecary with its smell of dried herbs and something metallic underneath, and the joke shop with its noise and color. He watched people. He'd always been good at watching people, at reading the small tells in posture and voice that told you what someone was actually feeling under what they were saying. A wizard in deep burgundy robes arguing with a potion merchant about pricing. 2 children dragging their mother toward a broom display. A witch in a wide hat who kept glancing over her shoulder at nothing visible. Gringotts smelled like stone and old money and something older than both. The goblins at their high desks looked at him over their ledgers and then looked again, which was interesting because Harry got the impression goblins didn't look twice at anyone. His vault was deeper than the others. The cart went down for a long time before the temperature changed, not colder but different, the way air changes when you go deep enough into the earth that it becomes a different kind of air entirely. When the door swung open, Harry stood for a moment at the threshold, feeling the space breathe. There was considerably more gold than he'd been led to expect. The goblin who'd driven the cart, Griffook, who had introduced himself with the clipped professionalism of someone who respected efficiency, watched Harry with small bright eyes. "Your vault," Griffook said, and there was something in his voice Harry couldn't entirely identify, not quite deference, more like acknowledgement. "The Potter family holdings," and a brief pause, "the other deposit." Harry looked at him. The other deposit was made 11 years ago, Gryffindor said. On the 1st of November, it arrived through channels we do not generally advertise. Another pause. We were not entirely sure what to do with it. We elected to wait. On a shelf at the back of the vault, separate from the gold, was a single object. A small black scale, the old-fashioned balance kind, 2 shallow dishes on arms made from a material that wasn't quite metal. It fit in Harry's palm like it had always been there. "What is it?" Harry asked, though he had a feeling. Gryffindor looked at him steadily. "We didn't ask," he said, with the tone of someone who had made an eminently sensible professional decision. He found Ollivanders late in the afternoon. After a full day of acquiring everything on his list with the systematic efficiency he applied to most tasks. The wandmaker's shop was narrow and dim and smelled overwhelmingly of wood shavings and something sharper underneath, ozone, maybe, or possibility. Ollivander materialized from the dimness in the way peculiar to very old men and very committed shopkeepers and looked at Harry with eyes the color of moonlight on still water. "Harry Potter," he said quietly. "Mr. Ollivander," Harry said. "I wondered when—" Ollivander stopped. He was looking at Harry the way the goblins had looked at him, with that particular quality of attention that meant recalibrating. "You have your mother's eyes," he said, which was what everyone said, but then softer and more to himself than to Harry, and something else entirely. The wand finding was not quick. Ollivander brought out box after box with increasing urgency and then something that might have been in a man less professionally composed excitement. Wands shivered when Harry touched them. Several made sounds, low harmonic sounds, like a note struck on an instrument in the next room. One flew out of his hand when he picked it up, which Ollivander observed with fascination rather than alarm. The wand that chose him was ebony and bone, dragon heartstring, 14 inches, and the heartstring, Ollivander said with strange care, had come from a dragon that had died of old age rather than been killed for the purpose. It was cool to the touch, and when Harry curled his fingers around it, the temperature in the shop dropped precisely 2 degrees. Black and gold sparks poured from the tip. "Curious," said Ollivander. He said it the way other people said remarkable or impossible. "Very curious indeed." He looked at Harry over his glasses for a long moment. "That wand," he said, "chose you because it recognizes what runs in your blood, not your father's magic." A pause. "Not entirely your mother's either, though hers was extraordinary." His pale eyes didn't look away. "Do you know what you are, Mr. Potter?" "Getting there," Harry said. Ollivander smiled, which transformed his whole face. "Good answer," he said. "The honest ones always do better." The Hogwarts Express left King's Cross on the 1st of September at precisely 11 o'clock, and Harry found a compartment, settled in, and was alone for approximately 4 minutes before the door slid open, and a boy with red hair and a smear of something on his nose leaned in and asked if the seats were taken. "All yours," Harry said. Ron Weasley sat down with the boneless relief of someone who'd been looking for a place to belong and found one. He introduced himself in pieces: name, family, brothers, the rat he'd been given instead of a proper owl, the relative enormity of the Hogwarts grounds which his brothers had described at length. Harry listened, finding he liked the rhythm of it, the easy, uncomplicated way Ron talked, like he'd already decided they were friends and was just getting through the formalities. "You're Harry Potter," Ron said eventually, looking at Harry's forehead. "I can see the scar." Then, with the honesty of someone who'd been told not to bring it up and decided it was better out than in, "Is it true you don't remember anything from that night?" "Not really," Harry said. "Green light, someone laughing." He paused. "And warmth. Actually, I don't usually tell people that part." Ron absorbed this. "That's not what I expected." "No," Harry agreed. The compartment door opened again, and a girl with remarkable hair and an expression of organized competence appeared on the threshold. She looked at both of them with the assessing gaze of someone running a quick mental inventory. "Have you seen a toad?" "A boy named Neville's lost one. I'm checking all the compartments." She looked at Harry more closely. "You're Harry Potter." "I'm Hermione Granger." "I've read about you. Well, not you specifically. The history is quite vague and contradictory, but the event you're famous for. Did you know most of the early accounts of what happened at Godric's Hollow are third-hand at best? The actual magical mechanics of what happened have never been properly documented." She paused, apparently remembering the toad situation. "Have you not seen the toad?" "No," Harry said, "but you're welcome to sit down. You might as well look from here." She sat with the efficiency of someone who had already decided this was the optimal decision. She had a book open on her lap within 30 seconds. Ron offered Harry some of his sandwiches. Harry accepted. The train moved through the countryside, and the three of them talked in the easy, rambling way of people who have decided without deliberate thought to be in each other's orbits. Hermione knew an enormous amount about nearly everything and wasn't shy about it, but she also listened, which Harry found rare. Ron was funny in the offhand way of someone who didn't know he was funny, and his observations about the wizarding world had the double-edged quality of a person who'd grown up inside it and therefore saw its absurdities clearly. Weasley, Potter, and Granger, Ron said at one point, apparently contemplating this combination. That sounds like a bad law firm. Or a very good one, Hermione said, without looking up from her book. Harry watched the hills darken outside the window, and felt the familiar sensation from his dreams, that sense of being exactly in the right place. Like scales balanced, he touched the small black scale in his pocket. It was warm. Hogwarts, when it came into view across the black water of the lake, was the kind of sight that stopped thought. Harry sat in the bow of one of the small boats as Hagrid led them across and watched the castle's reflection tremble in the dark water and felt the place breathe. Every old building had a personality if you paid attention. Privet Drive was tight and anxious. The Leaky Cauldron was warm and slightly chaotic. Gringotts was cold and precise. Hogwarts was ancient and alive in a way that had nothing to do with the students it held. Magic had soaked into the stone over centuries. The castle had seen things: death, war, joy, grief, all the grand and ordinary human passages. Harry felt it recognize him, not in a visible way, not in a way anyone would notice. But in the lake below them, something moved against the current toward the bow of his boat and then away again, and the water closest to him was very still while all around it rippled with the wake of the boats. The ghosts who drifted near the shoreline grew very quiet as his boat passed. Ron was looking over the side of the boat at the moving water with wide eyes. "Did you see? Probably the giant squid," Harry said easily. "Right," said Ron, who clearly didn't entirely believe this. "Yeah, probably." Hermione had her eyes fixed on the castle and was mouthing what might have been the Latin motto on the crest she'd read about, or might have been an early attempt at memorizing spells. They docked. They climbed stone steps. They waited in a small chamber off the Great Hall where the noise of several hundred students drifted through the walls like a tide, and a sharp witch named Professor McGonagall told them about the houses with clipped intensity. And behind her the ghosts of Hogwarts drifted through the walls to wish them well and then stopped. They stopped because Harry was looking at them, not staring, not doing anything peculiar, just seeing them. In the clear, uncomplicated way you see something for what it actually is rather than what it appears to be. The ghosts felt it. They went very still, or as still as ghosts get, which is a different kind of stillness than the living kind, and nearly headless Nick opened his mouth and closed it again. "You all right, Nicholas?" asked the fat friar cheerfully. "Fine," said Nicholas in a voice that suggested he was anything but fine, and also that he was not going to explain why. His eyes stayed on Harry until McGonagall ushered them all into the hall. The Great Hall was exactly as described in Hogwarts, a history which Hermione had read twice and summarized at length on the train. Enchanted ceiling, 4 long tables, hundreds of floating candles. The candles nearest the door guttered when Harry walked in, not all at once and not dramatically, a slight dip like a breath drawn inward. The flames turned very briefly from gold to a deep amber black, just for a moment. Just long enough for 2 or 3 people to notice the light had changed and look around in confusion, and then the candles steadied and everything was ordinary again. Dumbledore, at the head table, went very still. Harry didn't look at him. He filed in with the others and found a spot to stand and watch the sorting with genuine interest. The hat sang its song about the houses, which was well constructed, good internal rhythm, nice thematic structure, though Harry privately thought it leaned too heavily on the binary of bravery versus cunning. Things were more complicated than that. The hat, he suspected, knew this too. Names were called alphabetically. Hermione went to Gryffindor with the hat barely touching her hair, which made her look startled and then very pleased. Ron went to Gryffindor and turned to grin at Harry from across the room with the confidence of someone who'd expected no different. "Potter, Harry." The hall went quiet in that particular way, a held breath, collective and involuntary. Harry walked to the stool and sat down, and the hat dropped over his eyes. The inside of the hat smelled like old felt and something older, centuries of children's fears and hopes, all the uncertainty that came with being 11 and brand new to something enormous. Harry sat in it comfortably. "Well," said the hat. "Hello," said Harry. There was a pause. The hat was silent for 3 seconds longer than it had been for any student before it. "I've sorted thousands of students," the hat said slowly. "I have never." Another pause. Harry could feel it looking at him, in the way the hat looked at people, which was not with eyes. "There is something in you that does not fit any of my usual architecture." "That's all right," Harry said. "You're not afraid. Number, not of me, not of this, not of the thing I can see at the center of you, which is quite extraordinary." The hat seemed to be settling itself, gathering its considerable intellectual resources. "You could go anywhere. Slytherin would take you for the power. Ravenclaw for the depth. Hufflepuff," a brief pause. "Hufflepuff would, I think, recognize what you are more quickly than any of them. But you already know where you're going, don't you?" "Do I?" "Gryffindor isn't about being unafraid," the hat said. "It's about choosing to act even when you are." You'll never be afraid, which means Gryffindor will require something different from you. You'll need to learn what courage means when fear isn't the obstacle. A beat. Yes, Gryffindor, though I confess I'm curious what the candles will do. Gryffindor, the hat bellowed. The candles in the Great Hall went out. Every single one all at once, a simultaneous snuff. 400 students gasped. In the absolute darkness that followed, 3 full seconds of it, black as the inside of a tomb, 2 things happened. The 4-house hourglasses on the wall glowed, briefly, gold and black. And Harry stood up from the stool, handed the hat back to Professor McGonagall with a polite nod, and walked calmly toward the Gryffindor table while every single candle in the hall reignited behind him. Perfect order, perfect gold. As if nothing had happened, the hall was silent for a beat. Then the Gryffindors started cheering, mostly because Fred and George Weasley had decided it was the right call, and once Fred and George made a decision about tone, it tended to propagate rapidly. Harry sat down next to Ron, who stared at him. "Did you do that?" Ron whispered. "The hall does what it likes," Harry said. "Harry, the candles." "Nice effect," said Harry, "very dramatic." Ron stared at him for another 2 seconds and then started laughing, which broke whatever residual tension remained and allowed the sorting to continue. Harry helped himself to roast chicken and looked once at the head table. Dumbledore was watching him with those bright blue eyes that everyone said were kind and twinkly and warm, and Harry had no reason to doubt that they were all of those things, and also calculating in the way of someone who has just seen a variable they hadn't adequately accounted for. Harry met his eyes, pleasant and unreadable, and reached for the pumpkin juice. The first week of classes was a study in contrast. Charms was fine. Transfiguration was interesting. Professor McGonagall had a quality Harry appreciated. The quality of someone who demanded precision because they had genuine respect for what magic could do and what it could not. History of magic was a tragedy. Professor Binns was technically a ghost and technically teaching, but the combination produced something that wasn't quite either. Potions was Snape. Harry had read about Severus Snape the way he'd read about most things, thoroughly, without much preconception. What he'd read suggested a man of significant skill, intense personal investment in his subject, and motivations that ran several layers deep beneath the surface performance. The performance on first day was contempt in theater. The dim dungeon, the deliberate pause before sweeping in, the opening speech about the art of potions delivered with the precision of someone who had given it many times and still believed every word. Harry listened carefully. Under the theater was a man who genuinely loved this subject with the intensity of someone who had once had very little to love. "Potter," Snape said, in the middle of his interrogation of Harry's preparedness. "What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" The class went quiet. This was clearly intended as ambush. Harry thought about it for 2 seconds. "Draught of living death," he said, "one of the most powerful sleeping potions known. Asphodel is also associated with the underworld in Greek tradition, flowers of the dead. Wormwood has classical associations with bitterness and grief. It's almost poetic, the combination." A small silence. "The classical associations are irrelevant," Snape said, but there was something in his voice that hadn't been there before, a slight recalibration, subtle as a key change. "Where would you find a bezoar?" "Stomach of a goat. It acts as an antidote to most poisons." "The difference between monkshood and wolfsbane?" "None. They're the same plant, also called aconite, highly toxic. Used in certain protective potions and historically in preparations intended to prevent werewolf transformation." Harry paused, though the jury's still out on how effective it actually is at that. Snape looked at him. It was the same look the goblins had given him and Ollivander and the hat that moment of recalibration. Then his eyes moved to the scar on Harry's forehead and something happened there, something private and complicated that Harry filed away for later consideration. 5 points to Gryffindor," Snape said, which was clearly not what he'd intended to say when he started this exercise. "For unexpectedly thorough preparation." He moved on with crisp precision, but he didn't call on Harry again, which Harry suspected was tactical rather than dismissive. Quirrell's defense against the dark arts class was, on the surface, chaotic: the stammer, the purple turban, the slightly unfocused quality of the lectures. But Harry sat in the back row on the first day and watched Quirrell with the steady attentiveness he applied to things that felt wrong, and by the end of the first lesson had compiled a list. The stammer cut out twice for half a second each time when Quirrell was doing something else, writing on the board, flipping pages. Just half a second, but in that half second the man's posture changed. His shoulders settled differently. The slight tremor in his hands disappeared. Then, as if someone had flipped a switch, it came back. Hermione beside him was taking notes with focused concentration. Ron was drawing a dragon in the margin of his parchment. "He's afraid of something," Harry said quietly when they filed out. "He's afraid of everything," Ron said. He actually flinched when a student dropped a quill. "A quill, Harry? That's not what I mean." Harry thought about how to say it. Someone afraid of everything has texture to it. Different things make them jump differently. He's afraid of exactly one thing. Everything else is decoration. Hermione looked at him with sharp interest. What kind of thing? Something that knows he's afraid, Harry said. Something that's very close. They walked out into the corridor and the conversation shifted, because Ron had a story about Percy in the prefect bathroom that required full attention, and the observation went into Harry's mental archive alongside the candles at the sorting and the way the giant squid had approached his boat, to be taken out and examined later when there was more data. The black scale in his pocket was warm all day. By the end of the first week, Hogwarts had formed its opinions about Harry Potter, and the opinions were various. The Gryffindors thought he was brilliant and slightly strange and very calm in the way that either meant profoundly stupid or profoundly competent, and evidence was accumulating toward the latter. The Ravenclaws thought he was interesting and wanted to study him. The Hufflepuffs were uncertain but polite. The Slytherins, after Draco Malfoy's initial attempt at establishing a hierarchy that Harry had declined to participate in with such complete disinterest that Draco had been left standing in the entrance hall holding out a hand that nobody had shaken, were watchful and waiting. The teachers were, variably, fascinated McGonagall, careful Snape, alarmed Quirrell, and calculating Dumbledore, who had summoned Harry to his office on the third day, ostensibly to check on his settling in. That conversation had been cordial and unrevealing, which was itself revealing. Dumbledore had spoken in the gentle, wise elder register he clearly used with students, careful questions about his childhood and his previous magical experiences, and whether he was comfortable, all delivered with the warmth of a man who genuinely liked children and the precision of one who was conducting an assessment. Harry had answered pleasantly, offered nothing that wasn't asked for, and drunk his tea. When he left, he had a feeling they both knew the conversation hadn't accomplished what Dumbledore had intended. He found Hermione in the library that evening, 3 books open on the table and another in her lap. "Can I ask you something?" he said, sitting down. She looked up with the focused blink of someone surfacing from deep water. "Of course. How much do you know about Egyptian mythology?" She closed the book in her lap. Her expression shifted from distracted to interested in the specific way it did when a question had substance. Why? Harry put the small black scale on the table between them. Hermione looked at it. She reached out and her hand stopped half an inch from the surface, not because she pulled back, but because the air around it had a quality that gave pause. "That's not from Gringotts," she said. It's old. I mean, it's not old like an antique. It's old like," she searched for the word, "like it's from somewhere that doesn't have an age." "Yes," said Harry. "That's exactly right." She looked at him for a long moment. "What are you, Harry?" It was the most direct anyone had been with him since Ollivander, and he liked her for it. "I'm working on the answer to that," he said honestly. "But I think I'll need help with the research." Hermione picked up the book she'd put down and then put it back and picked up a different one, thinner, older looking, with a spine that said Mythological Intersections, The Ancient World and the Magical. She flipped to an index with the efficiency of someone who'd already been working her way through a catalog. Anubis, she read, god of death, embalming, and the afterlife, protector of graves, judge of the dead, depicted with the head of a jackal. She looked up. Scale imagery is central to his mythology, the weighing of the heart against the feather of truth and balance. "I know," said Harry. "I dream about the scales." Hermione was quiet for a moment. Then she said in the precise, careful tone of someone committing to a hypothesis, "I think we need more books." "I think you're right," said Harry. Outside the library windows, the Scottish sky had gone fully dark, and somewhere in the castle a door opened and closed and the sound of it echoed down into the stones, and in the deepest place below the school, behind a trapdoor that had been specifically mentioned as forbidden, something very old and very dark breathed in and breathed out and waited. Harry felt it, the way you feel a low note through the floor rather than hearing it. He reached out and picked up the black scale. It balanced perfectly in his palm. It always did. Chapter 2, What the Mirror Shows. The corridor on the 3rd floor right side was locked. Harry had walked past it 3 times in the first 2 weeks, not because he was looking for trouble, but because the route between the library and Gryffindor Tower had 2 options, and this one was shorter. The door was unremarkable, old oak, iron handle, no different from 100 other doors in the castle, except that the air around it had a weight to it, a pressure differential you felt in the back of your teeth rather than heard or saw. Something big was behind it, something alive and very unhappy about its situation. Ron had suggested on the 3rd pass that they try a different route. "It's just a door," Harry said. "It's a forbidden door," Ron said, with the emphasis of someone who found this distinction meaningful. Dumbledore said first night specifically. He did, Harry agreed. He wasn't trying the door. He was just standing near it, feeling the pressure in the air, reading it the way you read weather. You have a look on your face, Ron said. What kind of look? Like you're listening to something I can't hear. Harry turned away from the door. I'm just thinking. Could you think further from the door that Dumbledore specifically said not to go near? Harry smiled and walked on, and Ron fell into step beside him with the relief of someone who had successfully redirected a river, however slightly. Behind them, from behind the oak door, came a low sound, 3 overlapping sounds, actually, like a chord played on an instrument too large for any room, that neither of them mentioned. Hermione had found 4 books in the Hogwarts library's general collection and 2 more in the restricted section, for which she had very nearly convinced Madame Pince to grant access by presenting a detailed written argument about the scholarly necessity of cross-referencing primary mythological sources with secondary magical theory. Madame Pince had not granted access, but she'd been visibly impressed by the argument, which Hermione counted as a partial victory. The 4 general books were more useful than expected. Mythological Intersections was dense but rigorous. Ancient Gods and Modern Magic was less rigorous but broader. The other 2 were academic texts that Hermione had practically memorized in 3 days and annotated in pencil in margins so small Harry needed to lean close to read them. The thing that keeps coming up, Hermione said one evening in their favorite corner of the library, her voice low and rapid with the energy she got when ideas were organizing themselves into structure, is the concept of divine inheritance in magical bloodlines. It's considered fringe theory. Most magical historians don't take it seriously because it implies that some magical ability comes from sources outside the standard wizarding genealogy. But there are anomalous cases throughout recorded history. Wizards and witches with abilities that don't match their family histories. Magic that behaves differently. She looked up. There's a documented case from Alexandria in the 3rd century of a wizard who couldn't be killed by conventional means. Every account describes him recovering from fatal wounds. The magical community at the time called him a demigod. She paused. He was Egyptian. What happened to him? Harry asked. He stopped appearing in the historical record around 280 AD. Nobody knows why. She tapped her pencil on her open notebook. But the point is the magical mechanisms that would explain what you are, Harry, they're there in the scholarship. They've just been categorized as myth. Which is interesting, Harry said, given that we go to school inside a castle that teaches magic. Hermione almost smiled. Yes, well, academic communities are often the last to acknowledge revolutionary data. She turned back to her notes. The part I'm still working on is the why. Why would death curses make you stronger? Theoretically, if your divine inheritance is specifically from a god of death, then a death curse would be like throwing fire at something that runs on fire, Harry said. Exactly. She looked at him steadily. You're not just surviving them, you're absorbing them. Harry thought about the night he didn't remember, the green light, the warmth. The laugh, he thought about what it would mean for the killing curse to hit an 11-month-old child, and instead of tearing the soul free and ending the body's animation to fuel it, to run into divine death essence and collapse inward, feeding rather than destroying. Voldemort gave me power, he said. That night, probably more than once, Hermione said. Any attack, any dark magic in your vicinity that involves death as a mechanism, it would contribute. She paused. Harry, yes. That means every time someone tries to kill you, yes. She looked at him for a long moment. How do you feel about that? Harry considered the question seriously because she'd asked it seriously. Settled, he said, like it makes sense of something I've always known. Hermione nodded once, the nod of someone filing information in the correct place. Right, she said, then let's keep reading. 3 weeks into term, the dream changed. Harry had grown used to the vast dark space, the scales, the figure with the jackal head that was too large and too still and radiated something that wasn't heat but was like heat, an emanation, a presence. The figure usually watched in silence. Harry had grown comfortable in that silence the way you grow comfortable in a room where someone you trust is also reading. This time, the figure spoke. The voice was not a sound so much as it was a fact, the way the sound of a large bell is less like a noise and more like an event, something that reconfigures the air around it. You have found the scale. At Gringotts, Harry said, in dreams he tended not to bother with hedging. It was yours. It is yours now. A thing changes ownership when it moves from divine to mortal hand. You are somewhat both. I know, Harry said. I figured it out. Earlier than expected. The jackal head tilted an unhurried, considering movement. Your mother was cleverer than anyone gave her credit for. She would have told you herself if there had been time. Harry was quiet for a moment. What was she like? To you, she was the brightest soul I had encountered in 400 years. The scales swung slightly, balanced, settled. I do not explain myself, I am not in the habit of it. But she saw me, truly saw me, not what she expected to see, not what she feared. She saw the thing itself. And you stayed. Longer than I intended, a pause that had weight to it. You were the result. I did not plan you, but I do not regret you. From a god of death in the vast, dark space of a dream, Harry understood this was approximately equivalent to someone else saying, I love you, and he felt it land in the same place. Why tell me now? Harry asked. Because something has arrived at your school that should not be there. A fragment, a remnant. The jackal head turned as if looking past Harry at something behind him. Something that dies and will not finish dying. Something that has, in its refusal, become an insult to the order of things. Voldemort, Harry said, a name for it. The voice expressed something toward the name that wasn't contempt exactly, it was more categorical than that. He has made himself into an abomination. He has torn at the fabric that separates here from there, here being the living world, there being mine. The vast space seemed to expand slightly, as if registering an emotion. What is dead should come to me. He has prevented this, multiple times. Harry thought about what that meant, Horcruxes, though he didn't have that word yet. The act of splitting a soul to avoid judgment, avoiding the scales, avoiding this. So he's scared of you, Harry said. He is terrified, his father said, of what I represent. Which is the thing he cannot buy or curse or conquer. The thing he has dedicated his entire existence to fleeing. A sound that might have been the god's version of contempt. And now he hides in the school where my son studies, wearing another man's body. It is, I confess, a personal offense. Good, Harry said. The figure looked at him and the vast dark space was very still. Do not rush, his father said. You are powerful, but you are also 11 and there is value in the learning years. The fragment will not move quickly. Watch, understand, and when the time comes the scales tipped and balanced and tipped again. Be what you are. Harry woke up at 4 in the morning with the black scale warm in his fist and the complete settled certainty of someone who has just been told the truth about something they already knew. He lay in the dark for a moment, listening to Ron's steady breathing from the next bed and the sound of wind against the tower windows. Then he got up, dressed, and went to the library. He found the mirror at the end of November by accident, chasing a flicker of memory from the dream about here and there and what lay between them. The room was on the 5th floor, behind a door he'd never noticed before. Harry had noticed most doors in the castle by this point. He had an automatic cataloging instinct toward his environment, had developed it young in a house where knowing which floorboards creaked, and where Uncle Vernon was at any given moment had been operationally necessary. This door had been concealed, or had simply chosen not to show itself until now. The room beyond was long and dusty and very cold. The mirror of Eris stood at the far end like something that had been waiting. It was taller than Harry had expected, gilded and grand, and the lettering along the top read Eris Stra Eru Oit Ube Kafru Oidon Wosi, which Harry decoded standing in front of it before he looked into the glass itself. I show not your face but your heart's desire. He looked into it. He'd been told by Hermione's research into the mirror's known magical properties that it showed the viewer their deepest want, whatever they most yearned for that reality currently denied them. A boy who had grown up in a cupboard under the stairs might reasonably have expected to see a family, warmth, belonging, something soft and aching. The mirror showed him his father. Not a memory, not a construction, the figure was too large for the mirror's frame, too present to be a reflection of want. It occupied the glass the way a real thing occupies space, and the jackal head turned toward Harry in the amber eyes that were somehow also Harry's eyes, in the same way that Harry had Lily's eyes. This quality was inherited from an older and stranger lineage, looked at him with complete directness. Harry stood in front of the mirror and looked at his father. His father looked back. There was no sound, no words. Just that quality of attention, enormous and unhurried. The gaze of something that existed outside time looking at something that existed inside it, and between them a recognition that didn't require language. Harry put his hand on the glass. The mirror's surface didn't feel like glass. It felt like the threshold between here and there, that membrane paper-thin. Under his palm it was warm. I know, Harry said quietly. I'm watching him. The reflection of his father inclined the jackal head. Just barely, just enough. Harry stood there for a while longer, 5 minutes, maybe 10, before he heard footsteps in the corridor outside and took his hand from the glass and walked away without looking back. He didn't need to look back. The mirror hadn't shown him something he lacked. It had shown him something he had. Behind him, the mirror's surface shimmered once, gold and black, and then went still. Quirrell had been circling. That was the only word for it. Harry had observed the man long enough now to understand the pattern. It wasn't Quirrell specifically. It was something through Quirrell, something that was mapping Harry's habits and roots and the rhythms of his day with a patience and methodology that suggested considerable intelligence. Quirrell, who wasn't only Quirrell, started appearing at predictable intervals. At breakfast when Harry arrived early, in quarters between classes, once near the library at an hour when most students were at dinner. Each time the stammer was perfectly in place. Each time, the eyes were slightly wrong. Harry let it happen for 3 weeks, gathering data. Hermione noticed on week 2. Quirrell keeps showing up where you are, she said in the focused quiet of their library corner. Yes, is that should we be? He's not going to do anything here, Harry said, not in the middle of the school, too many witnesses, too much magical interference. He thought about what his father had said, a fragment, a remnant. He's assessing. Assessing what? What I am. Harry glanced up from his book. He felt something during the sorting, that's my guess. Something changed in the magic of the hall and he felt it, and now he's trying to understand it. And what do we do? Keep watching. Harry paused. Also, tell me what you found out about whatever's on the 3rd floor. Hermione's expression shifted from concern to the particular focused brightness she got when a puzzle had been sitting at the edges of her attention for too long. She pulled out her notebook. I've been thinking about that. The security level is unprecedented for a school. You need a specific reason to bring something here that required a 3-headed dog, several layers of enchantments, and specific concealment from the student body. The most logical candidate, given what we know about Gringotts' vault break-ins this summer. There was a break-in at Gringotts, Ron said, arriving with 3 bowls of something hot from the Great Hall. He distributed them without being asked. Ron had developed an instinct for when library sessions required provisions. The day Harry visited, Hermione said, July 31st, someone broke into Vault 713. The same vault Hagrid emptied the same day on Dumbledore's orders. She looked at Harry. Do you know what was in it? Hagrid didn't say. Small package wrapped up. The Philosopher's Stone, Hermione said with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had assembled a complete picture. It has to be. Nicholas Flamel has been making it for centuries. It produces the elixir of life, extends life indefinitely. Dumbledore and Flamel are known associates. If someone stole it or tried to, the safest place to keep it would be somewhere with a lot of children and the best defensive magic in Britain, Harry said, and right under the nose of the strongest wizard alive who would sense any serious attempt to take it. He thought about the 3rd floor, about the 3-headed sound behind the door. Clever, except, Ron said around his soup, it's also right under the nose of whatever's using Quirrell. Except that, Harry agreed. Which means either Dumbledore doesn't know about Quirrell or he does and thinks he can manage it. He picked up his bowl. Either way, that stone is the whole reason Voldemort is here. He wants it. He needs it because what he actually needs is a body, and that requires an elixir of life, Hermione finished. She looked down at her notebook. Harry, if he gets a body, he won't, Harry said simply. Ron and Hermione both looked at him. He won't, Harry repeated in the same tone, not defiance, not bravado, just a fact stated by someone who had access to information the others didn't quite have yet. The confrontation with Draco Malfoy happened on a Wednesday afternoon in November, which was, as Ron later observed, the worst possible day for it because Wednesday afternoons were when Professor Sprout held herbology, and they had mud on their robes and nobody felt like dealing with anything additional. Malfoy had been building to it for weeks. His first attempt at establishing dominance, the held-out hand on the first day, the pointed comments about Weasley's family and Granger's parentage in the corridors, had found no purchase with Harry, which was a new experience for Draco Malfoy and not one he'd processed well. He'd escalated through snide comments in class and tactical seating in the Great Hall, an appointed campaign of small provocations that Harry had either not noticed, or which Malfoy found more maddening, noticed, and found genuinely uninteresting. The Wednesday confrontation was in the entrance hall, where Malfoy had positioned himself with Crabbe and Goyle in a configuration that technically blocked the passage to the staircase. Potter, Malfoy said. Thought you'd want to know. I saw your friend Granger in the library again. Really, it's almost sad. Does she have any friends aside from a Weasley? And he looked at Harry with the sharp, specific contempt of someone who'd rehearsed this. Whatever you are. Ron stiffened. Harry looked at Malfoy with calm, genuine attention, the way you might look at an interesting geological formation. What I am, Harry said pleasantly, is in a hurry. Are you moving? Malfoy's pale face did something complicated. The casual neutrality of Harry's voice was harder to deal with than anger would have been. Anger gave you something to push against. I don't think I am, he said. I think Draco, Harry said. Malfoy stopped, not because the voice was threatening. It was the opposite of threatening. It was utterly, completely calm, and it had a quality underneath the calm that wasn't magic exactly but was adjacent to it. The way the space around a very large gravitational mass feels different from empty space. I'm going to walk past you now, Harry said. There's no version of this where that doesn't happen. You can be standing somewhere else when it does, or you can be standing where you are. The second option will be uncomfortable for you, and completely unremarkable for me. Something happened to Crabbe and Goyle first. They took a small involuntary step backward, the kind your body takes before your mind has caught up, an old animal instinct reading the room. Malfoy felt them move beside him and his jaw tight. Harry walked forward. The cold that came off him wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a visible effect. It was simply a fact of proximity. The air near Harry when he chose it had a quality. The torches on either side of the passage burned steady and low, and the shadows they cast went long. Malfoy held his ground for exactly 2 seconds before he moved, not quite stepping aside, maintaining just enough posture to call it choosing to move rather than being moved. Harry walked through without looking at him. Ron followed, and the look on Ron's face was the complex expression of someone experiencing awe and enormous satisfaction simultaneously. Behind them, Malfoy said nothing. On the staircase, 3 portraits they passed showed the painted occupants watching over their shoulders at where Harry had come from. One of them, a wizard in medieval dress, was making the sign against evil with his painted hand. But his expression wasn't frightened, exactly. It was the expression of something that recognized its place in an order. "You didn't even do anything," Ron said on the 3rd landing with a tone balanced between admiration and something almost like reverence. "He did it to himself," Harry said. "That's always more efficient." The first Quidditch match was Gryffindor versus Slytherin in early November, iron gray sky and wind that had opinions. Harry had made the Gryffindor team in October under circumstances that had required McGonagall to rewrite the first-year tryout exemption policy, and Madame Hooch to stand very still on the pitch for a moment saying nothing while she watched Harry fly, which Harry gathered was her version of profound emotion. He liked flying. He'd known he would before he ever got on a broom, something about the quality of being between the ground and the sky, in that liminal space that had its own rules. On a broom, he went straight to it and stayed there, and it felt correct in the same way the vast, dark space in his dreams felt correct. The match was going well. Gryffindor up 30 points, Harry circling high looking for the snitch's particular light-catching flutter, while below the chasers ran patterns and Slytherin's beaters worked methodically and the crowd noise came in waves. Harry felt it before it happened. The broom jerked, not wind, wrong direction, wrong quality. This was magical interference, someone on the ground muttering a jinx that worked through the broom's own enchantment. Harry looked down, scanning the crowd with the quick precision he applied to all visual searches, and found Quirrell in the staff section, eyes fixed on him, lips barely moving. The broom jerked again, harder, spinning Harry sideways. He gripped with his thighs and stayed on, but the broom had lost its smoothness. It was twitching, trying to throw him, and below he heard the crowd sound change from excitement to alarm. Harry looked at Quirrell steadily. Here was the thing about being what Harry was, a curse meant to cause death, even this indirect, mediated, breaking a broom and dropping a first year from 50 feet up variety of death, moved through the air toward him the way all such things moved toward him. He felt it arrive. He felt it the way you feel cold water hit your skin in a hot room, sudden, clarifying, and ultimately just more fuel. He let the broom buck 3 more times, because falling dramatically from a height was useful theater, and because Hermione, he'd spotted her a beat earlier, had set Quirrell's turban on fire, which meant Quirrell had broken concentration and the jinx was unraveling anyway. Then he put his hand out, caught the snitch that had been hovering 18 inches from his right ear for the past 20 seconds, and straightened the broom into a smooth, controlled descent. The crowd exploded. Harry landed in a mob of red and gold, people grabbing his shoulders and Ron doing something that might have been a hug and might have been a tackle, and in the chaos he looked over Ron's shoulder to the staff section. Quirrell was patting at his turban with both hands. Snape beside him was watching Harry with an expression that was calculating and very still. Quirrell turned, feeling Harry's eyes, and their gazes met across the pitch. There was a pause in the space behind Quirrell's eyes, the flicker, longer this time, where the stammer and tremor vanished and what looked out was something else entirely. Something old and cold and desperately, ferociously intelligent. Harry held the look. Then he smiled, pleasant as a clear morning, and let Ron drag him toward the changing rooms. That night in the Gryffindor common room, while the victory celebration ran its course around them, Harry sat with Hermione in a quieter corner and she looked at him with the focused, specific expression she used when she'd arrived at a conclusion. "You knew," she said. "The broom started going wrong at the 6-minute mark. I had time to feel what it was. I thought you were going to fall. I wasn't going to fall." She studied him. "The jinx should have thrown you. It works by unraveling the broom's own stability enchantment. No amount of physical grip or balance should have kept you on." Harry turned the snitch over in his fingers. "I felt it coming. It's not," he tried to find the words. "It's not that I can block curses deliberately. It's more that things involving death as a mechanism have a quality to them I can feel, like knowing there's a sound before you technically hear it, and you absorb the energy. Something like that." He paused. It made the broom catching feel easy. Everything felt very clear up there. Hermione was quiet for a moment, processing. "He'll try something more direct next time." "Yes. Are you worried?" "No," Harry said, and it was completely true and completely simple. He glanced at the fire. "Are you?" A short pause. "For you?" No, she said with the tone of someone who had recently updated their probability assessments. For everyone around you when it happened. Maybe a little. Harry almost smiled. Fair. Across the room, Ron was explaining to the twins how Harry had caught the snitch before anyone saw it move, with expansive hand gestures and sound effects. Fred and George were listening with the expressions of people hearing a story they intended to tell for years. The fire crackled. The black scale in Harry's pocket was warm. Outside the castle, the wind moved through the forbidden forest, and something in the third-floor corridor turned over in its sleep, dreaming in 3 heads simultaneously. Something else, deeper, darker, in the very foundations of the building. The thing that wore Quirrell, that breathed through his throat and looked through his eyes, sat in the cold of the dungeons and thought its fractured, desperate thoughts about a stone it could almost taste and a child it was beginning to genuinely fear. Which was for now exactly the right state of things. Chapter 3. The god's voice. December arrived at Hogwarts the way it always did, sideways in a storm, with complete conviction. Snow buried the grounds overnight and the castle woke up white, and the student body's collective mood lifted about 40 degrees because snow at Hogwarts meant something different than snow anywhere else. It meant the lake froze at the edges and the owls came in rhymed with frost and the great hall smelled of cinnamon and something warm, and Peeves threw snowballs at first-years from the third-floor landing until McGonagall appeared, and Peeves retreated with the speed of something that had excellent threat assessment instincts. Harry noticed that Peeves never threw anything at him. He'd clocked this in October. Peeves, who disrupted everyone with democratic enthusiasm, who had once emptied an entire bucket of water on Professor Flitwick's head, who considered no one above his attentions, would simply stop whatever he was doing and watch Harry pass with those flat poltergeist eyes that weren't quite eyes, and then resume after Harry had gone. No jokes, no projectiles, just that watching. He'd asked nearly headless Nick about it once casually, while Nick drifted beside him in the 4th-floor corridor. Nick had been quiet for an uncharacteristically long time. Peeves responds to the natural order, Nick said carefully. He is not alive, not dead, existing in a space between the two. Things that exist in that space have instincts. He paused. Certain presences remind them of their place in things. And I do that, Harry said. You do that rather significantly, Mr. Potter, yes. Nick looked at him sideways. I will say the ghosts of Hogwarts have a monthly gathering. For the past 2 months, the primary topic of conversation has been you. Favorable, complicated, Nick said diplomatically. We are unused to certainty. Most of us remain because we are afraid of what lies beyond. You walk around carrying what lies beyond in your general vicinity and seem entirely unbothered by it. A pause. It is simultaneously reassuring and deeply unsettling. Sorry, Harry said. Don't be, Nick said with a warmth that surprised them both. Reassuring is it's quite nice, actually. I'd forgotten what it felt like. The library corner had become their operational headquarters by December, which Madame Pince tolerated with resigned professionalism because Hermione checked books back in the correct order, and Harry had twice helped her re-alphabetize the ancient magical theory section, which nobody had touched in years, and which had developed its own internal geography based entirely on chaos. Right, Hermione said on the first Saturday of December, spreading 3 books in her notebook on the table with the authority of someone opening a general's map. I found something. Ron arrived with 4 cups of tea from the kitchens. He discovered the kitchens in October by following Fred and George and now operated them as a personal resource and distributed them. He sat down and looked at Hermione's notebook with the expression he wore when he was preparing to absorb significant information. Horcruxes, Hermione said. The word landed differently than other words. Harry felt it in his chest, a recognition, the way you feel the bass note of something dark rather than hearing it. That's what he's made, Harry said. It wasn't a question. Hermione looked at him. You knew, not the word, but my father told me he'd torn at the fabric between the living and the dead. Multiple times, Horcruxes would fit. He looked at the book she'd found it in, Magic Most Evil Restricted Section, borrowed under dubious pretenses he decided not to ask about. How many? The books won't say specifically. Even this one goes vague when you get close to the actual mechanics. There's a note in the margin here that says, see author's note on deliberate omissions, and the author's note says that some knowledge should remain incomplete. Hermione's expression suggested her opinion of this approach. But the principle is clear. He split his soul. Each piece anchors him to life even when his body is destroyed. He can't properly die, until they're all found and destroyed. Which explains why the Wraith in Quirrell can't just make a new body without the stone, Ron said slowly, working it through. He's too fragmented, not enough soul left to regenerate on its own. He's desperate, Harry said. He's also, Hermione said, by the definition in this book, and I want to be clear that reading this section was genuinely unpleasant, an abomination. The act of making a Horcrux requires murder. It tears the soul through an act of supreme evil. Everyone he made would have. She stopped, choosing words carefully, degraded what was left, made him less. Less human, Ron said. Less everything, Harry said quietly. He thought about the scales in his dream. About his father's voice, what is dead should come to me. He has prevented this. He thought about what it would look like from the other side of that threshold to have souls owed to you refusing to arrive. Souls of the murdered, victims of the act that made each Horcrux trapped between living and dead. He's not just a dark wizard, Harry said. He's a wound. Hermione and Ron both looked at him. In the order of things, he's a wound that won't close. Harry turned his teacup in his hands, and the stone would make it worse. Give him a body, give him power, give him the ability to make more. He paused. We can't let him get to it. Agreed, Ron said immediately. Enthusiastically, in fact. How do we stop him? We understand what we're dealing with first, Harry said. Quirrell's the immediate problem, he's the vessel. But Voldemort, he used the name without drama, without the flinch everyone else gave it, and Ron absorbed this with the focus of someone choosing to match his friend's courage. Voldemort without a body is limited. He needs Quirrell to act, which means Quirrell is both the threat and the weakness. And between the fragment in Quirrell and the stone, there are the protections on the third floor, Hermione said, which I've been mapping. The three-headed dog is just the first layer. There are at least 5 more based on the magical signatures I've detected through the floor. She turned her notebook to show Harry a diagram. I think each one was set by a different teacher. Sprout, I'd guess, from the botanical magic. Flitwick, maybe there's a charm layer. McGonagall, almost certainly. Harry looked at the diagram. It was good work, thorough, systematic, the kind of map you made when you intended to use it. Keep building this, he said. We'll need it. For when we go down there ourselves, Ron said, with the tone of someone who had already resigned himself to this outcome and was trying to decide how to feel about it. For when we have to, Harry said. The dreams intensified in December. 3 times in the first 2 weeks Harry found himself in the vast dark space, and each time the quality of his father's presence was closer, more tangible, as if the distance between here and there was thinner in winter, as if the year's end, when things died and turned and the world paused on its axis, created a membrane thinner than usual. The third dream was different. The scales were there and his father was there, but there was also a third presence, not visible but audible, a sound at the edges of the vast, dark space like a chorus of voices trying to speak all at once and not quite managing coherence. It had a quality Harry recognized: confusion. Displacement, the ones he has stolen, his father said. The souls from the Horcruxes, the ones who should have arrived and did not, they are between not here, not there, held in fragments of a torn thing. Harry looked at the edge of the space where the voices collected themselves into almost sound. There were many of them, too many. How long have some of them been waiting, he said. The first, his father said, for 50 years. Harry was quiet for a moment. Something moved in his chest that wasn't quite grief and wasn't quite anger but was both, at depth. Can I hear them? In time, when you are more, a pause, you are growing. Each attempt on your life, the broom, the curse at your birth, the smaller things, feeds what you are. But you are still becoming. The full weight of your inheritance is not yet settled. How will I know when it is? The scales tipped, balanced. His father's voice, when it came, had a quality of something almost like amusement, ancient and very dry. You will know, he said, because the dead will be able to hear you clearly, and they will answer. Harry woke up at 3 in the morning to find the curtains around his four-poster moving in air that was completely still. The black scale on his bedside table was spinning slowly, tipping back and forth in a perfect rhythm like a metronome counting something. He watched it for a while, then he picked it up, held it until it settled, and went back to sleep. On the 15th of December, Hagrid let it slip about Fluffy. It wasn't deliberate. It was a consequence of mulled mead and a warm fire and a natural storytelling instinct that Hagrid possessed in abundance, and that occasionally ran ahead of his discretion. Harry, Ron, and Hermione had come to Hagrid's hut because Ron had a genuine fondness for the man, and Hermione found his working knowledge of magical creatures academically invaluable, and Harry liked the quality of the space, the cramped warmth of it, the animal smells, the sense of someone who lived exactly as they chose. Fluffy, Hagrid had said after his second meet, is the easiest part of it really. Music, that's the whole trick. Any music'll do, even Juice humming, out like a light. He stopped. I shouldn't have said that. No, Ron said, you probably shouldn't have. More importantly, you've named the three-headed dog Fluffy. He's fluffy, Hagrid said, defensive. He's enormous and has 3 heads, Ron said. So size isn't a personality. Harry looked at his tea. Fluffy responds to music. He filed it, added it to the mental map alongside Hermione's floor diagram and his own observations about the magical signatures below the 3rd floor, and let the conversation move on to Hagrid's thoughts on the best approach to Norwegian Ridgeback egg incubation, which Ron engaged with fully and Hermione took notes on. Walking back to the castle in the snow, Hermione fell into step beside Harry. You're not going to tell him, are you? Tell him what? That you just added that to whatever plan you're building. Harry glanced sideways at her. Hagrid didn't mean to say it. Telling him I noticed would make him feel bad. Hermione was quiet for a moment. You're not what I expected, she said. When I read about you, the boy who lived narrative is it's all sacrifice and innocence and being chosen. You're not that. No, Harry agreed. You're something more, and I don't mean the divine inheritance specifically. She looked at him. I mean you're strategic and kind. And those things don't usually come together the way they do in you. Harry considered this. My mother was apparently very bright, he said. I think I got that from her. And from your father? He thought about the scales and the dark space and the voice that was a fact rather than a sound. The strategic part, he said, and the not being afraid of things. They reached the castle steps and Ron held the door open for them with the casual gallantry that was part of his basic nature, and the three of them went in out of the snow and the cold followed them for a moment before the warmth of the entrance hall swallowed it. Christmas at Hogwarts. Most students went home. The Weasley twins stayed, and Neville Longbottom and a few others, and Harry stayed because there was nowhere else to go and because he'd wanted to see the castle in the quiet. He was not disappointed. Hogwarts without its full population was a different creature, calmer, more willing to show itself. The echoes in the corridors went longer. The suits of armor seemed more present. The portraits chatted with you if you stopped, and the staircases moved more deliberately, as if not being watched allowed them to consider their choices. On Christmas morning, Harry found a pile of gifts at the foot of his bed that was larger than expected. Ron gave him a chess set, his own old one which he'd modified to be less bloodthirsty, with limited success. Hermione sent a book she tracked down through a contact at a used magical bookshop, The Divine and the Living, Intersections of Godhood and Mortality by a scholar named Taherka, published in Alexandria in 1889 in English and Arabic on facing pages. Hagrid sent rock cakes that required structural engineering to eat. The twins sent something in a box that moved. The last gift was a parcel with no note. Inside was an invisibility cloak, fine as water and exactly the size of a growing 11-year-old. Attached was a small card in handwriting that managed to be both warm and entirely unreadable. Your father left this in my keeping. It is time it was returned. Use it well. Harry held the cloak for a moment. It felt like Hogwarts felt old and alive and with a quality of having seen things. He put it on and went for a walk. The castle at midnight on Christmas was extraordinary. Empty corridors ran in silver-blue moonlight through the high windows. The ghosts drifted quieter and slower than usual, occupied with whatever ghosts thought about when not performing for the living. Harry walked through the school like smoke, visible to nothing. He ended up on the 7th floor in a room he hadn't found before, a large, bright space stacked floor to ceiling with objects of every description, accumulated over centuries, the repository of everything Hogwarts students had ever hidden or discarded or lost. The room of hidden things, though he didn't know its name. He walked through it slowly, reading the objects the way he read rooms, and in the back corner found a tiara on a stone bust, tarnished and old and radiating something he'd learned to recognize. The soul sound, the voices from his dream, thin and far away, but there, one thread of the chorus caught in the metal. He stood in front of it for a long moment. He didn't touch it. He wasn't ready for that yet, didn't have the tools or the knowledge, and there was something his father had said about not rushing that he took seriously. But he noted it with precision, followed its exact location, and kept the information in the same place as Fluffy's weakness and Hermione's floor diagram and Quirrell's fractured eyes. He stood there in the silence and the dust and felt the soul in the tiara trying to speak, and he said quietly to it and to all of them, I know you're there, I'm coming. The dust stirred in air that wasn't moving. He walked back out into the corridor and pulled the cloak tight and went back to bed. January was when Quirrell stopped being subtle. It happened first in defense against the dark arts, mid-January, when Quirrell was covering the theory of shield charms with his usual combination of stammer and genuine competence. Because whatever Quirrell had been before, he'd been a real teacher, and that knowledge still surfaced sometimes under the performance. He was in the middle of a sentence about Protego variants when he looked at Harry, and the flicker happened. Not half a second this time, almost 3 full seconds where the stammer simply didn't exist and the man's eyes were wrong, and the quality of attention aimed at Harry was the cold, intelligent attention of something very old reading a problem it hadn't solved yet. The class didn't notice. They were copying notes. Harry met the gaze and waited. The flicker ended. Quirrell blinked, stumbled over a syllable, moved on. But the assessment had been made. Harry felt it the way you feel a decision made in a room adjacent to yours, through the wall, through the substance of the air. It knows what I am now, Harry thought, or close enough. After class, Hermione pulled him into a window alcove. 3 seconds that time, she said. I know. That's not assessment anymore. That's preparation, Harry said. He's deciding when to what, try something directly, in the middle of school. Number he won't risk it here. Harry thought it through, watching students flow past in the corridor. The stone is what he needs. He'll move on the stone and he'll do it when he thinks the timing is right, and when we get in the way, he paused, we'll be in the way. So we stop him before he gets there, Ron said, appearing from the direction of the staircase with 3 biscuits from his pocket and the expression of someone who'd been listening from just around the corner. Harry looked at him. You knew I was there, Ron said, not bothering to make it a question. The biscuits, Harry said. You have a specific sound when you're carrying food and trying to be quiet. Like you're protecting it. Ron looked briefly offended and then decided to be flattered. So we move first, he said. Before he does, we move, Harry said, when we know enough to move right. He took one of the biscuits, which means Hermione needs to finish mapping the protections below the trapdoor, and we need to understand exactly what we're walking into. Hermione was already pulling out her notebook. The Quidditch match against Hufflepuff on the 3rd Saturday of January was not intended to be significant. The sky was clear and bitterly cold, the pitch slick, and Gryffindor was the heavy favorite. Harry went through his warm-up routine methodically and found the snitch 14 minutes into the match without significant drama. It had been hovering in the shadow of the Hufflepuff stands, which was an unusual position and suggested the snitch was in a creative mood, which they sometimes were. He was on his way down when it happened. Not a jinx this time, not an indirect attack through equipment or environment, a killing curse. It came from the far edge of the stands, from a concealed position angled up at the pitch, a beam of green that was visually indistinguishable from the standard color magic that sometimes occurred in stadium enchantments, and it was aimed with the precision of someone who'd planned this very carefully and timed it for when Harry was alone at altitude and the attention of the crowd was on the game below. Harry felt it coming from 30 feet away. It hit him at 20. The effect was not what the caster intended. The curse struck Harry in the chest and the green light bloomed outward, and then, instead of the usual single terrible moment of fatal disconnection, it inverted, drew inward. The way a fire draws oxygen, that same hungry reversal, everything rushing toward the center rather than away from it. Harry's broom stopped moving. He hung in the air for a full 2 seconds, completely still, and the cold that came off him wasn't winter cold, it was the cold of a different threshold, the cold of the air in his dreams, and below on the pitch every piece of magic currently active, the goals, the quaffle's anti-gravity charm, 2 maintenance enchantments on the bleachers, flickered simultaneously and then restabilized. Every person in the stands felt it. Not heard, not saw, felt, in the bone-deep way that significant magic announces itself. Then Harry flew down, smooth and unhurried, landed on the pitch, walked to the referee and handed over the snitch. Gryffindor wins, he said pleasantly. The referee, Madame Hooch, looked at him with the expression of someone who had just been very close to something significant and wasn't sure what the correct professional response was. She took the snitch. Game, she announced with creditable composure. In the stands, a person in a concealing charm had already moved. Harry tracked the exit with peripheral vision through the south gate toward the castle, limping slightly. Not Quirrell. Someone Quirrell had sent. Which was interesting because it meant Voldemort was now using intermediaries, which meant Harry had rattled him enough to make him cautious, which was exactly the right state of things. Ron was at his side in 30 seconds, pushing through the celebrating players. You stopped, Ron said, in midair, for 2 seconds. Harry, the whole stadium felt, are you? I'm fine, Harry said, and the truth of it was in his voice and his posture and the complete absence of shock in his expression. He looked at Ron. How much did people see? The broom stopping, the light, some people thought it was stadium magic. Ron lowered his voice, the cold, everyone felt that. Harry nodded. Tomorrow people will have decided it was a stadium malfunction. Will they? They'll want to, Harry said. It's easier than the alternative. Ron absorbed this. Around them the team was celebrating and Gryffindor supporters were flowing down from the stands and the noise of a one match covered everything else. Someone tried to kill you, Ron said quietly, with an Avada. Yes, and you just absorbed it. It made the broom stop for 2 seconds, Harry said. I'm not sure absorbed is the wrong word, but it's not quite right either. It's more like, he searched for the analogy, you know how a riverbed changes the flow of water, it redirects, it shapes. The curse hit what I am and what I am used it. Ron stared at him. You're incredible, he said with the simple, stunned honesty that was one of the things Harry liked most about him. Don't tell Hermione, Harry said, she'll want to test it. She absolutely will, Ron said, she's going to find out anyway. I know, I want at least 48 hours first. He told them both that night in the common room after everyone else had gone to bed, sitting by the last of the fire. Hermione's response was 40 seconds of silence followed by 3 questions in rapid succession about the inverted energy dynamics, after which she opened her notebook and wrote for 5 minutes without speaking. Ron's response was to stare into the fire for a long time and then say, Voldemort is going to keep sending things. Yes, Harry said, and every time he does you get more. Right, Ron looked at the fire. So he's basically the more he attacks you, the worse his own situation gets. The worse his own situation gets. Has he figured that out? He's figuring it out now, Harry said. That's why he used an intermediary today rather than going through Quirrell. He's frightened of touching it directly. He paused. A god of death looking at Voldemort sees a man who has spent decades running from the one thing he cannot escape. That's pure terror. That's someone who has built their whole existence on a foundation of that terror. That's actually kind of sad, Ron said. It's not, Hermione said, looking up from her notebook. He murdered countless people pursuing that goal. Sadness is not the appropriate response. Both things can be true, Harry said. Hermione considered this and wrote something else down. The fire crackled and the common room was warm, and outside the tower the snow was falling again, slow and deliberate, covering the grounds in white that caught the blue light of the winter sky and turned it silver. Harry turned the black scale over in his fingers. It tipped, balanced, tipped. He'll move on the stone soon, Harry said. February, maybe March. He's getting desperate, and desperate things move faster. He looked at both of them. When it happens, we'll need to be ready to go. Go, Ron said, into the third floor, through it, past Fluffy, past everything. Ron was quiet for a moment. Right, he said then with the tone of someone strapping a metaphorical pack onto their back. What do we need? And the three of them leaned over Hermione's notebook in the dying firelight and planned. Chapter 4, Weighing of the Heart. The trapdoor was 3 inches of old oak and iron hinges between the ordinary world and whatever came next. Harry stood in front of it on a Tuesday night in late February and listened to Fluffy breathing on the other side. 3 separate rhythms, slightly out of sync with each other. The way 3 people sharing a space will breathe differently even when they're all doing the same thing. The harp music Hermione had charmed into playing from a small enchanted box in the corner was doing its work. The breathing slowed, deepened. Became the breathing of something very large that had decided, temporarily, that nothing required its attention. He's asleep, Hermione said from just behind Harry's right shoulder. Her voice was steady. He knew she was frightened. He'd learned her tells over months. The slight compression at the corners of her mouth, the way she held her notebook even when she had nothing to write, and he knew she was choosing to be here anyway, which meant more than fearlessness would have. Ron was on his left, wand lit, looking at the trapdoor with the specific expression he wore for chess problems that had multiple possible lines. Music charm will last about 10 minutes once we're through, he said. So we're not coming back up this way regardless. Correct, Harry said, just confirming. You've confirmed it twice. 3-headed dogs are a lot bigger in person, Ron said. Harry pulled the trapdoor open. The room beyond wasn't dark. It was dimly lit from some sourceless ambient magic in the stone, the way deep places sometimes are in very old buildings. Fluffy occupied most of it. Harry registered enormous paws, 3 enormous heads tilted in the slack geometry of deep sleep, the wet warm smell of large animal in an enclosed space. And then he stepped through the trapdoor and dropped into the gap beside the beast's left flank before he thought about it consciously. Hermione dropped down behind him, landing neatly. Ron dropped down last and immediately looked at all 3 heads to verify the sleeping situation, then exhaled. The trapdoor below Fluffy's paw was obvious. Harry moved to it without ceremony, crouched, worked the latch, old, stiff but functional, and lifted. Below was darkness and the smell of earth and something growing. Devil's snare, Hermione said, identifying it before they'd even descended from the pattern of tendrils visible at the edge of the opening. It reacts to movement and struggles against it. The trick is to relax completely. Harry dropped in. The plant reached for him immediately. He felt the tendrils brush his arms and waist and begin to encircle, felt the tightening intelligence of a living thing doing what it was built to do, and he simply stood still and looked at it. Not a performed stillness, not the deliberate relaxation Hermione's research had described, just the quality that Harry had and had always had, which was the quality of something that the natural world, even the strange and accelerated natural world of magical plants, recognized as belonging to a different register entirely. The devil's snare's tendrils touched him and paused, drew back. Slowly, with the uncertainty of something that had received a contradictory signal from a deep place in its root intelligence. It did not retreat entirely, but it made space. Harry turned and looked up at the opening. Come down, don't struggle. Hermione descended, went still as the tendrils reached her, stayed still even when they tight. He could see the effort it took, the deliberate override of instinct, and the plant released her grudgingly as if she'd passed a test. Ron came down, fought the instinct to thrash for half a second, then forced himself still. The tendrils released him with less hesitation than with Hermione, because fear is more readable than the unfamiliar, and Ron's fear was honest and therefore legible. It didn't react to you at all, Ron said to Harry, looking at where the snare had retreated. It recognized what I am, Harry said simply. He was already moving toward the next chamber. Come on. The second chamber had the keys and the broomsticks, 1,000 silver shapes making slow figure-eights in a room full of trapped light. The door at the far end was locked, old, serious magic, requiring a specific key from among the hundreds circling above. Ron looked up at the swarm. These are moving fast. The right one won't be, Harry said. He looked at the keys. He looked for a long time with the particular unfocused focus that was his most useful mode of seeing, not tracking individual objects but reading the whole as a system, the way you can look at a crowd and see who's moving differently without deliberately looking at anyone. Swarm made patterns, and within the patterns one key was slightly out of phase with the others, moving but reluctantly. The way something moves when it's been used recently and is still deciding how it feels about that. He pointed. That one, bent wing on the right, silver with blue edging. Hermione was already on a broom, and she had it in 20 seconds flat, straight line, no hesitation, decisive in the air in a way that wasn't natural talent so much as determination applied with precision. She unlocked the door. The third chamber was the chessboard, life-sized pieces, black and white marble, standing in formation. The board stretched the full width of the chamber with no way past except through the game. 3 white pieces, a knight, a bishop, and a rook, were missing from the opposing side, leaving spaces in the formation. Harry looked at the board, and the board looked back at him the way all serious games look at you when you first sit down. Ron was already studying the positions with the focused intensity of someone who had found the thing he was genuinely best at. "Give me a minute," Ron said, and the shift in him was immediate and complete. All the anxiety of descended trapdoors and large sleeping animals dropped away and left behind the part of Ron Weasley that was utterly at home in a game with clear rules and high stakes. Harry stood back and let him work. This was the correct decision, and he knew it. There were things he could do that no one else could, and there were things Ron could do that no one else could, and wisdom was knowing which was which. Hermione watched Ron with an expression that was equal parts respect and affectionate impatience. She turned to Harry. "When we're through this, the next layer is Snape's, the potions puzzle. 7 bottles, only 2 lead forward or back, the others poison or stop. Logic problem, no magic to solve it." She tapped her notebook. "I've been working on the logical structure. I think I can." "You'll solve it," Harry said. "You'll solve it in under 3 minutes. She looked at him. "How do you know?" "Because you've been thinking about it for 2 months and you're the best logician in this school and you look at it like it's already solved." He paused. "I mean that." Hermione stood very still for a moment. Then she looked back at her notebook with an expression that was trying not to be moved and not quite succeeding. "Forward and back," she said, re-engaging with the problem. "Only 1 bottle for each. The others some poison, some nettle wine. The clues will be in the bottle sizes and the rhymes Snape will have left. I'll need 30 seconds to read it and maybe 2 minutes to." "Done," said Ron. They both looked at him. Ron had been moving pieces around the board in his head. Harry could tell from the quality of his stillness, the way his eyes had been tracking patterns invisible to anyone else. Now he stood at the edge of the board with his shoulders straight and a clarity in his face that Harry recognized as someone fully inhabiting their gift. "It's beatable," Ron said, "but we're going to need to sacrifice a piece." He paused. "Me." "Ron," Hermione started. "The knight," Ron said, and his voice was completely even. "I take the knight position. I let myself get taken. It opens the path for the 2 of you to get to the back row." He looked at Harry directly. "You need to get to whatever's at the end of this, yeah? This is how you do it." Harry looked at him. "You'll be taken off the board." "Not actually. It'll knock me out, yeah. The pieces do that. I've read about it." Ron's jaw was set. "I'll be fine once it's over." But Harry, his voice shifted, losing the strategic composure for a moment, becoming just Ron. "Whatever is past here, whatever it is at the end, you end it." "I will," Harry said. Ron nodded once with the simplicity of someone who believed what they were told when it came from the right source. Then he turned to the board and walked to the empty knight's square and picked up the discarded white piece and stood where it had stood. The board accepted him. The pieces around him shifted slightly, acknowledging the new player. "Ready?" Harry said. "Been ready for months," Ron said. "Let's go." The game lasted 11 minutes. Ron played it like a general, which was what he was, moving Hermione and Harry as pieces with the fluid confidence of someone who saw 6 moves ahead as naturally as most people saw 2. Harry followed instructions without pride, moving where he was told, and Hermione did the same, and together they were formidable in the way that a general with excellent material is formidable. Ron sacrificed himself in the 7th minute, stepping into the space where the opposing queen could reach him, and the queen moved with the implacable grace of a marble statue that has always known it was a queen, and took him off the board in a single sweeping blow that knocked him 10 feet sideways and left him on the chamber floor unconscious and breathing. The path to the back row opened. Harry stood over Ron for a moment, one hand on his shoulder briefly. Good game, he said quietly, though Ron couldn't hear it. He moved on. Hermione solved the potions puzzle in 2 minutes and 4 seconds. The 7th chamber smelled of something dark and chemical. 7 bottles lined up on a table with a roll of parchment between them. And Hermione read Snape's logic problem once twice, was already cross-referencing bottle shapes with the clues before she finished the second reading and pointed. That one moves forward. This one goes back. Harry looked at her. I'm going back, she said before he could say anything. Her voice was steady and her eyes were bright. Someone needs to stay with Ron. Someone needs to send word if you don't, if things go wrong. She stopped, and you need to go forward alone. I know, Harry said. Harry, she hesitated, which she rarely did. What's in the last room is Quirrell and Voldemort, and you're 11 years old. I know, Harry said again, and she searched for it. You're the son of a god of death, which means this situation was specifically built for you. I think so, and you're not. She looked at him closely. You're not afraid at all, are you? No, Harry said. It wasn't bravado, it was just true. Hermione looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She stepped forward and hugged him. Fast and fierce, over before he could fully register it, and then she was stepping back with her chin up and her expression returned to its usual precision. Go end it, she said. Harry picked up the forward bottle and drank. The cold of it moved through him in a line, clean and sharp, then gone. He stepped through the black flames on the other side of the table, and the fire moved around him like it was getting out of the way. The final chamber was lit from nowhere like all the others, but differently, a light that had a specific quality, cold and bright and unwilling, the light of something that wasn't fire. In the center of the room stood the mirror of Arist. And in front of it stood Quirrell, not performing, not stammering. He was standing with his back to Harry, studying the mirror with the focused desperation of someone who had been trying to solve a problem for a long time and could feel time running out. His shoulders were rigid. His hands were clasped behind his back with the tight grip of someone controlling themselves very hard. I wondered when you'd get here, Quirrell said. His voice without the stammer was different, deeper, smoother, and underneath the smoothness something that wasn't quite his voice anymore. The way a musical instrument sounds different when it's been played by a stronger hand. You've been remarkably predictable, Mr. Potter, building your map, waiting for the right moment. He turned. His face was composed and completely still, and his eyes were the wrong temperature. Did you think I didn't know? I thought you probably did, Harry said. He walked into the room at a normal pace. He stopped 10 feet from Quirrell and looked at him and then at the mirror, which reflected the room and Quirrell clearly and showed Harry in the glass something else, his father's shape, the scales tipping black and gold. The mirror won't show you where the stone is, Harry said. It shows desire. You want to use it, which means it'll never show you where it is. Quirrell's composure flickered. You're 11 years old. I know, you should be terrified. Of what? Harry said and meant it as a genuine question. Quirrell was quiet for a moment, then something happened to his face, a rearrangement subtle but total, like watching furniture in a room shift 2 inches in every direction simultaneously, and the voice that came out was not Quirrell's at all. Of me, said Voldemort. The word landed in the room like a stone in still water. Harry looked at Quirrell's face, Voldemort's borrowed face. The red-eyed thing looking through the host body with the focused terrible intelligence of something that had existed for 50 years by refusing to stop existing. The presence of it was immense and dark and very cold, the cold of something that had once been a person and had spent decades becoming increasingly not. Harry looked at it calmly. You've been sending things at me for months, Harry said. The broom jinx, the killing curse at the Quidditch match. I wanted to see what you were, Voldemort said through Quirrell's mouth. The mouth smiled, which was an unpleasant effect. I've seen things, impossible things. I have been told by sources I trust that you're not what you appear to be. And what do your sources say I am? A pause. In the pause, Harry could feel the intelligence working, vast, damaged, brilliant in the way that things become brilliant when they strip away every consideration except survival. Something old, Voldemort said. Something that does not belong entirely to the living world. The red eyes studied Harry with the focus of a man confronting an equation that doesn't resolve. Your father was not James Potter, no, Harry said, and you are not afraid of death, number. Because you are, and here Voldemort stopped, and the stop was itself informative because Voldemort did not stop. Voldemort, in Harry's estimation, was not someone who left sentences unfinished. The unfinished sentence meant the conclusion was one he had reached and did not want to say aloud, did not want to make real by saying. Say it, Harry said. The red eyes looked at him. You know what I am, Harry said. Say it. Voldemort, and this was the most remarkable thing that had happened yet, more remarkable than the snare retreating or the chess pieces kneeling or the potions puzzle, because nothing in any account suggested this was possible, was silent. The silence had a specific quality, the specific quality of terror. The scales in the mirror tipped. I need the stone, Voldemort said finally, and the shift back to operational language was itself a kind of answer, retreating to what was manageable. Give me what I want and I will let you leave. Give me what I want and I will trouble you no further. I know what I am dealing with now. I know," a pause, "I know better than to consider direct conflict advisable." He was negotiating. He was negotiating with an 11-year-old. Harry looked at the mirror. He walked toward it around Quirrell, who moved out of his way with the involuntary instinct of the possessed body's own survival instinct, and stood in front of the glass. In the mirror, his father stood with the scales, and the scales had a small red stone sitting in one dish and on the other nothing. The stone was light, feather-light, the scales balanced perfectly. Harry felt the stone drop into his pocket. He didn't reach for it, didn't will it consciously. It simply moved because he and the mirror understood each other, and the mirror had always known what he was. Because the mirror showed what was truly desired, and what Harry truly desired was balance, order, the proper resolution of things, and the stone in Voldemort's hands was the opposite of that in every possible way. He turned to face Quirrell. "You should let him go," Harry said. "The man you're inside, he's been with you since Albania. He agreed to this because you promised him things, and because he was desperate, and because desperate people make catastrophic decisions. Let him go." Quirrell's face twisted. "Quirrell is mine," Voldemort said. "He has been mine for—" "I know how long," Harry said. "Let him go. You think you can give me instructions? I think," Harry said, "that you're already frightened of me. I think you've known since the Quidditch match at the latest what happens when your power touches mine. I think you're standing here trying to negotiate rather than attack because you know what happens if you attack." He paused. "And I think the longer you stay in this room with me, the worse it gets for you." The room was very still. Voldemort, and Harry could see it, could read the terrible calculus being performed behind those red eyes, was doing what he always did, which was assess survival odds with the cold precision of a mind built entirely around self-preservation. He was assessing and not liking what he found. "What are you?" Voldemort asked, and the voice finally was just a voice, small and afraid and very old. Harry looked at him. "I'm the son of the god you've spent your whole life running from," Harry said. The silence that followed was the longest in the room. Then Quirrell moved, not a negotiation, not a careful approach. He lunged because the fragment driving him had made the calculation that any chance was better than none, that the stone was in this room and the boy was standing between them, and that a physical grab was faster than magic at this distance, and Voldemort, afraid or not, was at the end of his options. His hands touched Harry's wrist. What happened next was not violent, precisely. Violence implies force applied from outside. This was something more interior than that. The contact between Quirrell's hands and Harry's skin was the contact between a dying thing and what death actually was, not an ending but a transformation, the passage from here to there, and what Quirrell carried was something that had been refusing that passage for 50 years. The divine death essence that ran through Harry's blood recognized the refusal the way a body recognizes an infection. Quirrell screamed, not from pain exactly, from the sensation of something being undone. Harry held still. He didn't grip, didn't push, didn't try to amplify whatever was happening, because he was learning even now, in this moment, that the power didn't need amplification, it needed allowing. It was like a river. You didn't make a river run, you opened the channel. The light that came off the contact was not green. It was gold and black, the colors from the candles on the night of the sorting, and it was warm in the way the dreams were warm. The warm of the vast dark space with the scales and the figure that was both enormous and perfectly, finally, the right size for what it was. Quirrell's body was disintegrating. Not dramatically, this was not an explosion or a blaze of fire. It was more like watching something complete a process that had been ongoing for a long time. The host body, already damaged beyond repair by months of Voldemort's corrosive presence, was simply finishing. The wraith rose. Harry saw it with his eyes, which was something other people in this situation had not been able to do. A dark shape, tattered and thin, the remnant of a once considerable soul now frayed to something barely coherent. Red eyes, the ghost of a face that had once been handsome and had become what obsession makes of things. It looked at Harry. And Harry, the part of him that was his father's son, the part that balanced the scales and weighed the heart and administered the passage from here to there, looked back with the full weight of what he was. The wraith was afraid in the pure, simple way that things are afraid of the true version of what they've always feared, which is different from the manufactured terror it usually deployed. It was afraid the way a caught thing is afraid when there's nowhere left to run. "Voldemort," Harry said. "Tom," the name landed on the wraith like something physical. "This isn't your judgment," Harry said. His voice was quiet and completely level and carried under its surface something vast and resonant, not quite his own voice and not quite not. "Not yet, I don't have that authority, not completely, not yet." He paused. "But when I do," he let the sentence end there. The wraith looked at him for one long, terrible moment. Then it fled, not through a door, not through a wall, but through the membrane between here and there, and Harry felt it cross and felt his father on the other side note its passage with a weight that shook the air in the room briefly, like a single struck note. It crossed, but it did not arrive, not fully, because the Horcruxes held it, like a rope around its ankle, keeping it from going all the way. held between here and there in the worst kind of liminal space, which was the kind you couldn't leave in either direction. Good enough, Harry thought, for now. He stood in the empty room with Quirrell's body cooling on the floor. Quirrell, who had been a real man once, who had gone to look for Voldemort out of ambition and desperation, and found something that consumed him entirely, which was its own kind of tragedy, and put his hand in his pocket where the Philosopher's Stone sat warm and slightly luminous and no larger than a walnut. The mirror showed him from behind his father's shape in the glass, and the scales were balanced. He turned around and walked back the way he'd come, through the potions room and the chest chamber and the key room and the devil's snare. And at each stage the enchantments recognized the returning figure and went quiet, and the devil's snare drew back entirely this time. And at the top of the last passage Fluffy was still asleep under Hermione's charm, and Harry climbed through the trapdoor and stood in the corridor and breathed the ordinary air of Hogwarts for a moment. Then he went to find Hermione and Ron. Hermione had gotten Ron sitting up by the time Harry came back through, not fully conscious, but awake enough to blink and say, "Did it work?" in a voice thicker than usual. Harry crouched beside him. "It worked," Harry said. Ron looked at him. His face was pale from the knock and his eyes were still finding focus, but the relief in them was immediate and complete and personal. "Good," he said. "I can't believe I let a chess piece knock me out. Embarrassing." "It was a queen," Harry said. "You let yourself be taken by a queen on purpose to win the game. That's not embarrassing. That's exactly right." Ron processed this, and then something in his expression settled. "Yeah," he said. "All right." Hermione was looking at Harry with the focused question in her eyes that she was asking without asking, because Ron was present and only half conscious, and some things waited for the right moment. "The stone," she said quietly. Harry put it in her hand. She looked at it for a moment, that small red thing, the product of 600 years of Nicholas Flamel's work, the object an immortal obsessed Dark Lord had tried to steal, the thing that sat in her palm now weighing almost nothing. "What do we do with it?" she said. "Return it," Harry said, "to Flamel through Dumbledore." He paused. "Though we should probably have our own conversation with Dumbledore first." Hermione looked up. "Our own conversation? About several things." She looked at him steadily. "About what he knew?" "Yes," Harry said, "about that." Ron from the floor said, "Someone help me up before you plan the next thing, please." Chapter 5. The name written in black. The hospital wing at 2 in the morning had a particular quality, the hush of a place built specifically for recovery, where the silence was functional rather than empty. Madame Pomfrey had installed Harry in the third bed from the window, with the efficiency of someone who had learned not to ask too many questions about the source of unusual magical exhaustion and the temperature anomalies she'd noted on his skin, and had given him a pep-up potion he didn't particularly need and told him to sleep, which he'd agreed to without mentioning that he wasn't tired. He was not tired, he was thinking. The stone was in his bedside drawer. He'd intended to give it to Pomfrey to pass along, but she'd bustled in with the potion before he could produce it, and then bustled out again, and the moment had passed. It sat there now, warm through the wood of the drawer, that small red fact, the object that had set everything in motion. Ron was in the bed to his left, genuinely asleep, one arm hanging off the side in the boneless way he slept when he was truly out. The chest concussion had been real, and Pomfrey had clucked over it with the focus of a woman who took her professional domain seriously. He'd be fine. He already was fine, essentially. He'd been talking about the game's strategy on the walk up, analyzing where he could have set up the sacrifice more elegantly, which was the sign of someone processing victory rather than trauma. Hermione had been sent back to Gryffindor Tower by Pomfrey with a firmness that admitted no argument. She'd gone, but she'd squeezed Harry's hand first and said, "Dumbledore knows you're here," in a tone that meant she'd already thought about everything that implied and had thoughts. Harry had thoughts too. He was still having them when the hospital wing door opened at precisely 2:47 in the morning, and Professor Dumbledore came in. The headmaster moved through the ward with the quiet of someone who'd visited it many times at many hours, and had learned to wear hospital spaces lightly. He was in his nightclothes under his robe, which made him look approximately as formidable as he would have in full ceremonial dress, which Harry had noticed was a quality some people had. The authority went in the bone and the fabric didn't change it. He pulled a chair to Harry's bedside and sat down. The moonlight from the tall windows caught his half-moon glasses and made them briefly opaque. "Harry," he said. His voice was warm and soft in the way it always was, the voice of a man who had spent decades cultivating wisdom as a presence in a room. "How are you feeling?" "Fine," Harry said. "Genuinely, you don't have to treat it as a pleasantry." Dumbledore looked at him over his glasses with those blue eyes that were kind and calculating in equal measure. And Harry thought, not for the first time, that this was a man who was accustomed to being the person in a conversation who understood more than the other party, and was in the process of revising that assumption. "Quirrell is dead," Dumbledore said, not gently, not harshly, as a fact being laid on the table between them. "I know," Harry said. Voldemort's wraith departed the school sometime in the last several hours. I have been monitoring. The signature has gone. A pause. He is not destroyed, but he is considerably diminished and considerably displaced. He fled, Harry said, through the membrane. He's between, not in the living world, not fully in the other. The Horcruxes are keeping him from going all the way. He watched Dumbledore's face. You know about the Horcruxes. Dumbledore was still for a moment. Then, yes, for some time. He regarded Harry with an expression that had moved from warm calculation to something more direct. You are remarkable, Harry. Every account I've received from the staff who observed the sorting, from the portraits that have been rather chatty this year, from my own observations, suggests that you are something considerably beyond what I anticipated. What did you anticipate? Harry said. A brave boy, Dumbledore said, a talented wizard, someone with the qualities necessary to serve a particular purpose. He paused, and the pause had a quality of honesty Harry hadn't expected. I anticipated someone I could guide. Harry looked at him steadily. And instead, Dumbledore smiled, and the smile was genuine, not the warm performance Harry had catalogued in previous interactions, but something real and slightly rueful. And instead I have you, he said. Which is, I confess, a considerably different situation. You put the stone here deliberately, Harry said, not just to protect it, to give whatever was using Quirrell a target. Keep Voldemort focused on Hogwarts under your eye where you could monitor him. Yes, which means you knew about Quirrell. A brief silence. I had strong suspicions, and you let an 11-year-old share a classroom with him. The silence this time was longer. I believed the school's protections were sufficient. I believed my own presence was sufficient, Harry said. I know, and maybe it would have been for a different 11-year-old. He didn't say it with anger. He said it with the calm precision of someone establishing facts. But you weren't planning for what I actually am, were you? Your plan was built around the boy who lived, a child with a scar and a famous survival. That's a manageable variable. You could guide that. Dumbledore looked at him. And you are not that. Number, what are you? Dumbledore asked, and the question had a quality Harry recognized, the same quality as Voldemort's question in the chamber, which was the question of someone who had run their calculations and found a variable they couldn't resolve. The difference was that Dumbledore asked it with curiosity rather than fear, Harry told him. Not everything, not the dreams, not the private weight of the vast dark space and his father's voice. But the shape of it, divine inheritance, Anubis, the nature of what death curses did when they hit him rather than any ordinary child. The mirror, the stone moving to his pocket without his reaching for it. He told it straightforwardly in plain language and watched Dumbledore receive it. Dumbledore listened without interrupting, which was itself a sign of respect. When Harry finished, Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment, looking at the moonlit floor. The night Voldemort came to Godric's Hollow, Dumbledore said slowly, I arrived after. The residual magic in that house was, I have never seen anything like it in 140 years of magical practice. The killing curse had been cast and had done something that I could not then and cannot now fully explain. He looked up. I told myself it was your mother's sacrifice. The magic of love is a protective force, and that is true, partially. Lily's love was extraordinary and her sacrifice genuine. He paused, but I think I have always known there was more to it. She was the brightest soul he'd encountered in 400 years, Harry said quietly. His words, not mine. Dumbledore looked at him with an expression that moved through several things quickly. He spoke to you. In dreams, mainly. And what does your father want from this? Harry thought about the scales and the balanced weight of things and the way his father had said, I do not plan you, but I do not regret you. Balance, Harry said, the order of things restored. Voldemort is an insult to the natural order. He's been refusing judgment for decades, holding souls that should have arrived, tearing at the fabric between here and there. He looked at Dumbledore. That's what I'm here to resolve. Ultimately, Dumbledore said, ultimately. And in the meantime, Harry looked at him with the patience of someone who has already thought several moves ahead. In the meantime, I'm 11 years old at a school that teaches magic, which is where I should be. I want to learn. I want to understand what I am completely and what I can do and what the limits are, and I want to do that here. A pause. But I want to do it as what I am, not as a weapon you're maintaining for a specific purpose, not as a piece in your endgame. Dumbledore was quiet. I don't think you're a bad man, Harry said. I think you've been doing what you believed was necessary and making the calculations you believed had to be made. But the calculations were based on incomplete information. He paused. I'm giving you the complete information now. You're remarkably, Dumbledore stopped. Mature for my age, Harry said. I have a god for a father. Some things come with the territory. Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. Then something happened to his face. The careful, warm authority rearranged itself into something simpler and more direct, something that had probably been there under the performance all along. What do you need from me? Dumbledore said. Access, Harry said, to the restricted library without conditions. To information about Horcruxes, all of it, whatever you've compiled, to be included in the relevant strategy, not briefed after decisions have been made. He paused. And I need you to stop trying to protect me from things that can't hurt me and start trusting me to know the difference. Dumbledore looked at the window for a moment. Then he reached into his robe and produced a slip of parchment and a quill and wrote something on the parchment and handed it to Harry. It was a library authorization, unrestricted. The information about Horcruxes, Dumbledore said, I will compile and share. It will take some time. Some of what I know is in private correspondence and old case notes. He paused. There are more than most people would believe possible. I know, Harry said. I've seen one already, stored in this school. Dumbledore went very still. In this school, the Tiara, Room of Hidden Things, 7th floor. He watched the stillness on Dumbledore's face. You didn't know that one? No, Dumbledore said quietly. I did not. It explains a few things about the castle's magical atmosphere that I imagine you've chalked up to age and general enchantment residue. Dumbledore removed his glasses and cleaned them, which Harry had observed was his version of a long pause. Harry, I want to be direct with you, please. I have spent the last decade preparing for a war, building positions, maintaining alliances, placing resources. I have thought of you, and I say this knowing it reflects poorly on me, primarily as the central piece of an endgame strategy. The prophecy described you as having power Voldemort does not know, and I believed I understood what that meant. He put his glasses back on. I did not understand what that meant. No, Harry agreed. I would like if you're willing to begin again, Dumbledore said, with the actual information. Harry looked at him, this old man who was genuinely extraordinary and genuinely flawed and genuinely in this moment, choosing to be honest rather than strategic, and nodded. Put the Horcrux list together, Harry said. We'll start there. He slept a little after Dumbledore left because his body had opinions even if his mind didn't, and woke at 7 to find Madame Pomfrey doing rounds and Ron sitting up in his bed eating toast that had appeared from nowhere and looking at Harry with the particular expression he wore when he'd been awake thinking. You talked to Dumbledore, Ron said, not a question. This morning, 2-ish. How'd that go? Better than expected, Harry said. He's adjusting his approach. Ron absorbed this. When you say adjusting his approach, I mean he stopped trying to manage me and started trying to work with me. Ron looked at his toast for a moment. That's good, yeah. He looked up. Harry. Last night, what happened in that room? Harry told him, not all of it, not the interior experience of the contact, the feeling of the channel opening, but the shape of it. Quirrell Voldemort, the flight of the Wraith. Ron was quiet when he finished. The Wraith looked at you, Ron said, and ran. Yes, Voldemort ran from you. He assessed the odds and found them unfavorable, Harry said. Ron stared at him for a long moment. Right, he said. And then, with the honesty that was his best quality, I'm really glad you're on our side. I'm on the side of the scales being balanced, Harry said. Yeah, but specifically I'm glad that's our side. Harry smiled. Hermione arrived at 8 with 2 books and her notebook and the expression of someone who had been awake since 5. She sat on the edge of Harry's bed and looked at him with the focused clinical attention she applied to important problems. Tell me everything, she said. Harry told her everything. Hermione's responses were distributed throughout the telling, small, precise sounds of acknowledgement, the scratch of pencil on notebook, 2 questions for clarification about the mechanics of the Wraith's departure that Harry answered as best he could. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment, reviewing her notes. The stone, she said. Harry produced it from the bedside drawer. Hermione held it, turned it over. It sat in her palm and caught the morning light and broke it into small red fragments. It should go back to Flamel, she said. He and his wife have been using it for centuries. If we destroy it without consulting him, that's their lives we're deciding about. I know, Harry said. Dumbledore will handle it, but I wanted us to see it first. He paused. I wanted you to hold it. Hermione looked at him. Why? Because you spent 2 months researching what it was and building the map and solving the logic problem and coming down with us knowing full well what was at the bottom, and you never, he paused, you never asked for credit. You did it because it mattered. You should get to hold it. Hermione looked at the stone in her palm for a long moment. Then she put it carefully on the bedside table and looked at her notebook and said, with the control of someone keeping something behind a door, the Horcruxes. Yes, Harry said, accepting the redirect. Dumbledore has a list. He's compiling one. The tiara in the Room of Hidden Things is confirmed. I felt the soul's signature, same as the sound from my dreams, the souls held between here and there. He'll have made at least 6, Hermione said. The books that discuss the theory, even obliquely, suggest that 7 is a number with magical significance. 6 Horcruxes would make the soul 7 parts. She stopped. That's horrifying, actually. 7 objects, Ron said from his bed. He'd finished the toast and was listening with his knees pulled up. One of which we know about, one of which Dumbledore probably knows about. That's 5 more. "The diary Lucius Malfoy has," Harry said. They both looked at him. "How do you know?" Hermione started. "Draco talked about it at Christmas," Harry said. "He mentioned his father's collection of dark objects, the way he said it like they were trophies. One of them he described as a very old diary with no name on it that his father keeps separately from everything else and never talks about directly." Harry paused. "Something about the way he said it, and when I felt the signature in the room of hidden things, I remembered it. Same quality," Hermione wrote rapidly. "So the tiara, likely the diary. Dumbledore's sources should have more." She looked up. "We have years to find them all. You said so yourself, Voldemort is between. He's not a threat, not functionally, not right now." "Not right now," Harry agreed. "But the Horcruxes are. Every one of them is a soul held captive between here and there." He paused. "That's not just strategic. That matters." Hermione looked at him. "Because of what your father said." "Because it's wrong," Harry said simply. 50 years for some of them, waiting and held and wrong." The morning light moved across the ward floor and the stone sat on the bedside table, and the three of them were quiet together for a moment, not the quiet of people with nothing to say, but the quiet of people who are in the same understanding. The end-of-term feast was a strange event. Gryffindor won the House Cup. Dumbledore had stood at the head table and very deliberately awarded them a quantity of last-minute points that Ron had calculated afterward came to exactly what they needed, and the hall had erupted, and through all of it Harry had sat at the Gryffindor table and felt the particular sensation of a chapter concluding. Quirrell's defense position was listed as temporarily vacant in the end-of-term notices. Nobody talked about him directly. The school had processed the year's strange events the way communities process things they don't fully understand, which is to wrap them in the nearest available narrative and leave the actual facts respectfully unexamined. The story the students had settled on was approximately: Quirrell had been involved in something dark, which explained the turbaned behavior all year, and Harry Potter had sorted it out, which was something Harry Potter apparently did, which was consistent with the whole candles at the sorting incident that everyone still thought about but rarely discussed directly. Draco Malfoy sat at the Slytherin table and ate his feast with the controlled expression of someone who had been recalibrating since January and wasn't finished yet. He'd said nothing direct to Harry since the entrance hall incident in November, but his observation of Harry had shifted from hostile assessment to something more complicated. Less contempt, more wariness. The wariness of someone who has updated their model of the world and doesn't entirely like the updated model. Harry ate his dinner and talked to Ron about next year's Quidditch prospects and listened to Hermione's thoughts on an improved study schedule for second year, and felt the warm weight of the year settling into him, not an ending but a deepening. The way a foundation becomes more solid the more you build on it. Hagrid came over after the feast to say goodbye, enormous and warm and slightly tearful in the way he got at the end of terms, and looked at Harry with an expression that was complicated with things he clearly wanted to say and wasn't sure he had the right to. "All right, Harry," he said. "Yes," Harry said, "really." Hagrid nodded, swallowing something. "Your mum," he started, then stopped. "She was, I know," Harry said gently. "I've heard she was extraordinary." "She was," Hagrid said, voice thick. "She really was." He put one enormous hand briefly on Harry's shoulder, very briefly, because Hagrid was always careful about the size differential, and then moved on down the table. Harry watched him go. Professor McGonagall stopped him in the corridor outside the Great Hall as students streamed past toward the dormitories and packed trunks and the logistics of departure. She put a hand on his arm to slow him down lightly, the way she touched things that required precision, and when the corridor had cleared slightly, she looked at him with the expression she reserved for matters of substance. "I am not in the habit of discussing things outside my purview," she said, which was her version of a preamble, "but I want to say something and then not say it again." "All right," Harry said. "What you did this year," she stopped, and the stop was itself notable because McGonagall rarely searched for words. "The staff have discussed it, privately, the events of last night and the nature of what was in this school and who addressed it." She looked at him directly. "What you are is not something I pretend to understand, Mr. Potter, but what you are in this school, in this community, is a student under my care. And I intend to take that responsibility seriously regardless of the nature of your parentage." "I know," Harry said. "I appreciate it." "You will also be attending my transfiguration class and doing the assignments," she said, the warmth retreating back into professional briskness, "regardless of whatever divine considerations may occupy your time." "Of course," Harry said. "Good," she said, "then we understand each other." She walked away with the purposeful stride of someone who had said what they meant and intended to act on it, and Harry watched her go and thought that Hogwarts, for all its complications and all its managed secrets and all its layers of strategy and mystery, was genuinely his. Not a prison, not a stage. His. He found Snape in the corridor outside the dungeons on the second-to-last morning of term. Not sought, encountered, the way you encounter things when a castle is half empty and both parties are moving through it at an early hour. Snape was carrying something to his office, a stack of end-of-year assessment records, and he stopped when Harry came around the corner and they faced each other in the gray morning light. The moment lasted 4 seconds. Long enough for Harry to read the complicated things Snape was doing behind his eyes, the assessment running again, the same one from the first day of potions, but with a full year's additional data to incorporate. "Potter," Snape said. "Professor," Harry said. A pause. "You should know," Snape said with the precision of a man selecting words carefully for reasons he was keeping private, "that I was aware this year that Quirrell was compromised. I had been watching him." "I know," Harry said, Snape's jaw tightened fractionally. "You knew. I noticed you watching him at the Quidditch match. After my broom started going, you were the counter-curse, yes, to counteract the jinx." A long pause. "Yes. Thank you," Harry said, "though it wasn't necessary." "I didn't know it wasn't necessary at the time," Snape said, with the crispness of someone stating a fact that carries more weight than the words themselves. Harry looked at him. "You tried to protect me." "I was protecting the school," Snape said, exactly as he would have said it if Harry had been anyone else, and exactly as he wouldn't have needed to say it if Harry had been anyone else. Harry nodded. "I understand," he said, and he did, not just the surface of it but the depth, the old grief and old loyalty and the complicated specific love that refuses its own name. "For what it's worth," Harry said, "she would have been glad to know it." Snape went completely still. Harry walked past him and down the corridor and didn't look back, because some moments are better left whole than examined. Behind him, after a moment, Snape continued toward his office, and if there was something different in his footsteps, it was too subtle for anyone but someone who was listening for it to hear. The night before departure, Harry had the dream one final time. The vast dark space, the scales, his father, enormous and present and very still. But different tonight, the chorus of voices at the edges was closer, and the scale in Harry's dream hand was the same scale he carried waking, and his father stood in the full weight of what he was rather than the approached version, the translated version, the "this is what a mortal mind can hold" version. He was vast. He was old. He was the fact at the bottom of every fact about the living world. And he was looking at his son with an expression Harry could read now that he couldn't have read in September. Pride, not the warm demonstrative kind, the kind that was in the very way he was looking, the acknowledgement of a thing well done, the recognition of a person becoming what they were. The wraith fled, Harry said. It fled, his father confirmed, and it told things in the crossing. Fragments of what you are reached it in the moment of contact, and those fragments traveled with it to where it went. It is frightened as it has never been frightened. Good, Harry said, next year will bring new complications. The fragment in the diary will move, other things will stir, the war that was interrupted is not finished. I know, Harry said. The souls held between. His father paused, and the pause had a quality of care which was not something Harry had heard in him before. They are patient. They have waited a long time and they can wait longer, but they know now that someone is coming. Harry stood with the dream scale in his hand and the vast dark space around him and his father before him, and thought about the corridor outside the dungeons and Snape's still face. About Ron on the chessboard. About Hermione saying go end it with her chin up. About the tiara in the dust and the chorus of voices trying to speak. I'm coming, he said to the voices, to the held souls, to the waiting dead. The scales tipped, balanced. Yes, his father said, you are. The Hogwarts Express left at 11, and Harry sat in a compartment with Ron and Hermione, and the countryside unspooled outside the window in early summer green. And Ron was telling a story about Fred and George, and the time they'd enchanted Percy's prefect badge to say something anatomically inventive. And Hermione was laughing despite herself. And Harry had his feet up on the opposite bench and his hands around a cup of tea that had arrived from the trolley, without him quite registering buying it. The black scale sat on the seat beside him, balanced in the slight vibration of the moving train. Second year, Ron said, having concluded the Percy story with a triumphant flourish. What do you think? More Quidditch, better defense teacher, maybe an entire year without someone trying to kill you at school. Unlikely on the third one, Hermione said. Worth hoping for, though. Harry looked out the window at the passing fields. Second year will be the diary, he said. Hermione and Ron both looked at him. Lucius Malfoy will introduce it back into play somehow. It's consistent with what I know of him. He's got a dark object he considers a trophy, and if Voldemort resurfaces in any form, it'll destabilize things, and destabilized things can be exploited. He thought about it. There's also whatever is in Chamber of Secrets. The what of what? Ron said. I'll tell you what I know, Harry said, which isn't much yet, but I want Hermione working on it before term starts. Obviously, Hermione said, already thinking, pencil tapping her notebook. Parseltongue traditions in magical architecture, probably. The Founders period. There are 3 texts I've been meaning to. 2 months before term, Ron said. We have 2 months. Then she has 2 months, Harry said. Ron looked between them. I'm going to spend those 2 months in the garden denoming and playing Quidditch, he said, with the tone of a man making a principled stand. And then you'll catch up in August, Harry said. Obviously, Ron said, cheerfully resigned. Obviously, that's what'll happen. The train moved through the green summer afternoon, and the 3 of them sat in the warm light and the easy silence of people who know each other well enough to share a quiet without explaining it. And Harry turned the black scale in his fingers, tipping and balancing, and looked at the world going by outside the glass. Ahead of him was summer on Privet Drive and Malfoy's diary and the chamber and the slow, patient work of unraveling what Voldemort had built, Horcrux by Horcrux, and on the other side of all of it, eventually, when he was more, the full weight of his inheritance and the judgment he would learn to carry. Behind him was a year of candles going out and coming back, of the snare drawing back, of a wraith looking at him and finding something it couldn't face. The scale balanced. Harry looked out the window and felt the year's end move through him like the warm air through the open train window, easy and inevitable, and looked forward. There was a great deal of work left to do. He found he was looking forward to it. Chapter 6, Between the Living and the Dead. Privet Drive in summer was its own specific kind of unbearable. Not the dramatic unbearable of danger or conflict, just the low, grinding unbearable of smallness. Small rooms, small thinking, the tyranny of a household organized entirely around the comfort of people who had decided that the world outside their cul-de-sac was either irrelevant or threatening, and that these 2 categories were essentially the same. Harry had been back 3 days. 3 days of Aunt Petunia finding reasons to redistribute his chores, and Uncle Vernon finding reasons to remind Harry of the rules, and Dudley finding reasons to eat everything in sight while describing in detail the things his friends were doing this summer, which apparently involved a water park and a new games console and several birthday parties, none of which Harry was invited to, which was fine because Harry had no interest in attending. He'd set up a workspace in his room. The Taharka book Hermione had sent, his own notebook, he started keeping one over Christmas, detailed and organized, more like a working document than a diary, and the black scale on the windowsill where the afternoon light hit it. He spent the mornings doing the chores that were asked of him with the efficient speed of someone who saw no value in dawdling over unpleasant necessities, and the afternoons reading and writing and thinking. The Dursleys had noticed the change in him. Not articulated it. Vernon would no sooner articulate an observation about Harry than he'd articulate an observation about a natural disaster. But they felt it, the way animals feel weather. They circled his general vicinity at a slightly wider radius than last year. Petunia spoke to him in complete sentences more often than she used to, which was her version of careful diplomacy. Dudley had tried his usual shoulder barge in the kitchen on the first morning, and something had happened. Nothing visible, nothing magical, just the quality of the air when Harry looked at him. And Dudley had found reasons to be in other rooms since then. Harry was not trying to frighten them. He was simply no longer trying not to be what he was. There was a difference. The letter from Hermione arrived on the 6th day, thick with enclosures. Her handwriting on the envelope was quick and precise. She always wrote like she thought, efficiently, with the minimum space between the idea and its expression. Harry, I've been in the library since 2 days after we got back. Mum and Dad are indulging me. They think it's a phase, which is fine. Found 3 relevant texts on Slytherin's architectural contributions to Hogwarts. We'll summarize. More importantly, found a reference to the Chamber of Secrets in a book called Hogwarts, the hidden architecture that I had to ill from the National Magical Repository of Manuscripts, which apparently takes 6 to 8 weeks but took 4 days because I wrote a persuasive letter, don't ask. Chamber was supposedly sealed by Salazar Slytherin himself, the entrance keyed to Parseltongue. What's inside varies by account, but the recurring element is a great serpent of extraordinary age. You'll want to look at the enclosure on page 4, the Latin passage, 2nd paragraph. HGPS Ron says hello and that the denoming is going well. I think this means he's avoiding looking at the books I sent him. Harry spread the enclosures on his desk and read through them with focused attention. The Latin passage on page 4 described the serpent in terms that were vague, in the way of someone writing carefully around something they were afraid of. A creature whose gaze could kill, ancient beyond reckoning, loyal to the blood of Slytherin. A basilisk. Harry wrote the word down and circled it and drew a line to the word Horcrux and then put a question mark after the line because he didn't know yet, but the question was worth holding. He wrote back to Hermione that afternoon, 3 pages, and added his own enclosure, a translation of a passage in the Tahorka book about divine death essence and its interaction with venomous creatures, which he thought might be relevant but wasn't sure yet. He sent it with Hedwig, who had been waiting with pointed patience for something useful to do. Then he opened his notebook to a clean page and wrote at the top, Horcruxes, confirmed and probable, and spent the next 2 hours organizing everything he knew. On the 14th day, the Weasleys appeared. Harry heard the car first, an unusual burbling sound from the street that was inconsistent with the narrow internal combustion vocabulary of Privet Drive, and then the front garden became suddenly populous with redheads. Ron arrived through the garden gate with the energy of someone who had been looking forward to something and was acting on it, followed by Fred and George, who wore matching expressions of mild chaos, and behind them Arthur Weasley, who was looking at number 4 with the expression of a man encountering a specimen he'd read about extensively. Harry opened the front door before they knocked. Ron grinned. "Mum says you're to come for the rest of the summer. We've sorted it with you're with them." "How?" Harry said. "Dad asked," Ron said. "They said yes very quickly. Dad thinks they were just pleased to have an excuse." "Dad also touched their electricity meter and it made a sound," George said. "A very interesting sound," Fred confirmed. Harry looked at Arthur Weasley, who was looking at the number on the door with genuine curiosity. Arthur felt Harry's gaze and looked up, and the curiosity shifted into something more careful, the same recalibrating look Harry had become familiar with, but warmer than most versions. Gentler. "Harry," Arthur said, "lovely to meet you. Ron's told us a great deal." A pause. "Molly's made a room up." "You're welcome as long as you'd like." "Thank you," Harry said. "Give me 10 minutes. He packed in 8. The Dursleys had been in the sitting room through all of it. Harry stopped in the doorway on his way out and looked at the 3 of them, Vernon on his chair, Petunia on the sofa, Dudley between them, and felt something that wasn't pity exactly and wasn't contempt exactly and was perhaps closest to the feeling you get when you see a small cramped space you used to live in and understand clearly that you have outgrown it. "I'll be at the Weasleys for the summer," he said. "Thank you for the accommodation." Vernon started to say something that had the structure of a complaint, but something in the opening word disagreed with him and he stopped. "Right," said Harry. "Goodbye." He left and the door closed behind him and the summer opened up on the other side. The burrow was everything Privet Drive wasn't. It was structurally improbable, too many floors, too many additions, leaning in ways that violated load-bearing principles but didn't seem to care. It was loud. It was warm. It smelled of cooking and garden and the particular smell of a house where magic had been lived in rather than studied, the accumulated olfactory record of years of spells and meals and creatures and projects. Harry stood in the kitchen doorway on the first morning and watched Molly Weasley make breakfast with the systematic authority of someone who had been managing a large operation for decades. 6 plates, toast at 3 stages, eggs in 2 styles, the teapot moving in an arc that suggested it had opinions about the optimal brewing time, and Molly's instructions were actually more of a collaborative negotiation. Molly looked up and saw him. "Harry, sit down, there's plenty." He sat. Ron appeared from the stairs still doing up his shirt. Percy came through the door with a book open over his breakfast before he'd properly sat down. Ginny hovered in the doorway looking at Harry with the focused intensity of someone who had been told a great deal about a person and was now updating that account against the primary source. Harry looked at Ginny and nodded. "Hi." Ginny went pink and looked at her plate. But she sat down and the shyness wasn't quite as rigid as it had been in the doorway, which Harry counted as progress. Ginny Weasley was 11, slight, with the specific energy of a youngest child who had spent years watching older siblings and had learned to be patient with the precision of someone building to something. She was also, Harry had noticed, watching everything in the kitchen with slightly too much attention, not rudely, but with the quality of someone who had something sitting heavily at the edge of their thoughts. Harry let the meal continue. He ate toast and listened to Fred and George discuss some project involving a product they declined to describe with specificity, and watched Arthur read the morning's Daily Prophet with the running commentary of someone who found the mundane operations of the ministry a source of genuine bemusement. He noticed the diary. It was in Ginny's school bag, open at the top. Old black, a name on the front that he couldn't quite read from this angle, but the sole signature was there, thin and cold, like a radio signal from somewhere very far away, barely perceptible but unmistakable if you knew what you were listening for. A sound below hearing. Harry kept his expression exactly as it was. He picked up his tea. He followed the information with perfect precision and continued eating his eggs. He would tell Hermione today and Ron this afternoon, and he would be careful, because Ginny was 11 and had no idea what she was carrying, and the diary was already working. He could feel it, a thread of influence thin as silk thread, the kind you don't feel until you reach up to brush something from your hair and find it wrapped 3 times around your hand. But not at breakfast, not in front of her. Not yet. 2 days later, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, who had arrived by flu on the 16th with a bag full of books and the purposeful look of someone reporting for duty, sat in the field behind the burrow while gnomes observed them with malicious curiosity from the hedgerow, and the afternoon sun did something warm and unhurried with the air. Ginny has it, Harry said. Hermione looked up from her notebook. Her expression didn't change, but the pencil stilled. When did she get it? She had it when I arrived. That's 2 weeks minimum. The influence starts slowly, Hermione said, pulling her notes on Horcruxes to the front. At first it's just a listening presence. It responds. It's very good at being whatever the writer needs it to be. That's how it builds trust. She paused. Then it starts drawing energy from the host, draining, using them. She doesn't know, Ron said. His voice was flat in the specific way it got when something was close to home. He was looking at the garden, not at either of them. No, Harry said. How does it? She's my sister, Harry. She's been at the kitchen table every morning and I didn't. You didn't know what to look for, Harry said. Neither did I precisely until I'd had time to confirm what I was feeling. He looked at Ron directly. She's not in immediate danger. The process is slow. We have time to do this right. Ron was quiet. Ron, Harry said. Yeah, Ron exhaled. Yeah, right. What do? We need the diary, Hermione said. Destroy it, but properly. A Horcrux requires significant magical damage to the physical vessel. Basilisk venom is theoretically one of the few things that can permanently destroy magical objects at that level. She tapped her notes. There's a basilisk in the school. In the chamber, Harry said. In the chamber, Hermione confirmed. Which connects to Slytherin's plumbing via Parseltongue-activated mechanisms throughout the school. The entrance is most likely in the girls' bathroom on the 2nd floor, Harry said. Hermione looked at him. There's a ghost there, Myrtle. She died in that bathroom about 50 years ago. Her death was unusual, described in the historical records as unexplained. Instantaneous and complete, no discernible cause, with a brief account from a student who heard a boy speaking in a strange language just before. He paused. 50 years ago was when Voldemort was a student. Hermione stared at him. You read the student death records. I read everything in the library. All of it. The relevant sections. Hermione made a sound that was somewhere between exasperated and deeply respectful and wrote something in her notebook. Right. So the chamber entrance is in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. The basilisk has been down there for 50 years, and we need its venom to destroy the diary. Which is in Ginny's possession, Ron said. Which means we need to address both things, Harry said. Ron looked at the hedgerow for a moment. A gnome threw something small and organic at them from behind a root. Ron watched it without reacting. Can you get the diary without her knowing? Before it goes further. I'd rather tell her, Harry said. Ron looked at him. She's 11, Harry said, not fragile. She's your sister, which means she's tougher than she looks and probably smarter, and she deserves to know that the thing she's been writing in has been writing back in ways she hasn't fully recognized yet. He paused. If we take it without telling her, she'll wonder what happened, and the explanation she invents will probably be worse than the truth. Ron thought about this for a long moment. She's going to feel awful, he said quietly, when she realizes. Probably, Harry said. But that's better than what the alternative leads to, Ron nodded slowly. Tell her gently, tell her honestly, Harry said, which is the same thing done right. The conversation with Ginny was in the garden just before dusk, while the rest of the house was occupied with after-dinner logistics. Harry had asked her to come outside with the directness he used for things that required it, and Ginny had come because she was the kind of person who responded to directness with her own form of it, even when she was nervous. She stood opposite him in the long gold light with her arms crossed in the defensive but aware posture of someone who already suspects the conversation is significant. Harry told her. He told it simply, without drama. Watching her face move through the stages, initial denial, realization, the specific horror of retroactively examining trusted interactions and finding them contaminated. He told her what the diary was and what it had been doing and what it would continue to do if left unchecked. And he told her she hadn't done anything wrong, and that it was a sophisticated object designed specifically to do exactly what it had done to someone exactly like her. Ginny listened with both hands gripped together and her jaw set and her eyes very bright. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. It was listening, she said. The whole time, yes, and writing back. Pretending to be, she stopped. I told it things, embarrassing things, worried things about starting school and about. She stopped again harder. I know, Harry said. It's good at that. It found the exact things you needed to hear. Ginny looked at him. Her eyes were bright but not wet. She was deciding not to cry. Harry could see the decision being made. You're not going to make me feel better about it, are you? I wasn't planning to. Good. Her jaw was set. I'd rather know exactly what happened than be told it's fine. Then, it was a sophisticated piece of dark magic operating on someone with no defense against it at the time. You were targeted specifically because you were young and new to Hogwarts and close to the Weasley family, which has a history of opposing the wizard who made the diary. You were a tool and you didn't know you were being used as one. He paused. That's the accurate version. Ginny looked at him for a long moment. What do you need from me? The diary. She uncrossed her arms, reached into the pocket of her jeans, which Harry had already noticed she kept it in now, a proximity pattern consistent with increasing influence, and held it out. The moment her fingers released it, the sole thread that had been between the diary and Ginny, thin, cold, barely perceptible, snapped. The sound of it was below hearing, but Harry felt it like a plucked string. Ginny felt it too by the way she exhaled a long involuntary breath, like something had been sitting on her chest and had just shifted. Harry held the diary. The soul signature was stronger at direct contact, angry and cold and fragmented, recognizing what was holding it with the same recognition the Wraith had shown at the end of the school year. The thing in the diary knew what Harry was, and it did not like it. That was fine. Harry didn't need it to like anything. Thank you, he said. Ginny looked at her empty hand and then at him. Will you destroy it? Yes. Good, she said with a precise and personal satisfaction that Harry found entirely reasonable. She looked at him directly. Harry, you're not what I expected. What did you expect? She thought about it honestly, which was the kind of answer he liked. Something more performed, more hero-shaped, like the books about you. She paused. You're actually just very certain about things. I know what I am, Harry said simply. Ginny looked at him for a moment longer. Then she nodded once with the look of someone who has updated their model of a thing and found the update satisfying. She walked back toward the house with her shoulders straight and the posture of someone who had just handled something difficult and was going to keep handling it. Harry watched her go, then looked down at the diary. The surface was warm with something that wasn't warm. Later, he told it. He told Dumbledore about the diary in a letter that night, precise, factual, no embellishment. He also told him about the chamber and the basilisk and his plan for second year. Dumbledore's response arrived the following morning, carried by a school owl that waited with trained patience for the reply. The response was 2 paragraphs. The first was a carefully worded acknowledgement of everything Harry had told him, and a note that he had now confirmed the diary's nature through other means. The second paragraph was shorter. I find myself in the unusual position of being kept informed rather than informing, and I will confess it is a better position than I expected it to be. I have compiled the initial Horcrux documentation as promised. It will be in your possession before term begins. Please continue to tell me what you find, Harry. I am, with significant sincerity, asking rather than directing. APWBD. Harry folded the letter, put it in his notebook, and went to find Ron and Hermione. The last days of August accumulated the way good days do, without announcing themselves. The Weasley household ran at its own specific frequency, a chaos that was actually quite ordered if you paid enough attention, and Harry paid enough attention to everything. He played Quidditch in the field with Ron and the twins until the light went, and ate dinners that required both hands and full attention, and sat with Hermione in the evenings going through Dumbledore's Horcrux documentation when everyone else had gone to bed. The documentation was thorough and it was terrible. 6 Horcruxes. Dumbledore had identified 4 with reasonable certainty. A locket belonging to Slytherin, a cup belonging to Hufflepuff, the tiara in the room of hidden things, the diary. 2 remained uncertain, 1 possibly within Voldemort's snake, which was unconfirmed, and 1 unknown. 6 objects, Hermione said, her voice doing the careful, neutral thing it did when she was looking directly at something difficult. 6 murders minimum. 6 souls used as means to an end. And all the souls of those murdered by the people those 6 murders empowered, Harry said. He looked at the list. The locket, where is it? Unknown. Slytherin's, it could have passed through multiple hands since the 16th century. She tapped the parchment. The cup is similar, Hufflepuff's. Both were in the possession of a witch named Hepzibah Smith prior to Voldemort. Dumbledore tracked the provenance backward. She died, he stole them. And then hid them. Harry thought about hiding places, about the room of hidden things, the perfect hiding place for something you could return to, a school you once attended, place where your history lived in the stone. He hid things in places that meant something to him. The school was obvious. The others will be similar, places connected to his personal history. Slytherin's locket would have meant something specifically about his heritage, Hermione said. He was obsessed with his connection to Slytherin, which means the hiding place for Slytherin's object specifically would be somewhere that confirmed that connection to himself. Harry paused. There's a cave on the sea. In the files Dumbledore sent, there's a note about a childhood incident. A place Riddle took children from the orphanage, somewhere that frightened them and didn't frighten him. Hermione looked at him. You think the locket is in a cave. I think the locket is in the place where Tom Riddle first understood that fear was a resource. He closed the file, but not yet. We're 12, we'll be 13 by the time we're ready for that. Hermione looked at him steadily. You've already planned how old we'll need to be for each one. Rough estimates, Harry said. The tiara and the diary are accessible at 12. The cave is a trip that requires more preparation. The cup, he paused, the cup is somewhere even more protected. 16 maybe, depending on what, on how fast you get through the books. Hermione stared at him, and then despite everything, despite the weight of 6 Horcruxes and 6 murders and the map of terrible things to be done, she laughed. A real laugh surprised out of her, and she pressed her hand over her mouth and then stopped trying to suppress it and just laughed, and Harry watched her laugh with the warm, simple feeling of someone in the right place with the right person. Ron appeared in the doorway. Why is Hermione laughing at midnight? Is the documentation funny? I didn't think it'd be funny. It's not, Hermione said, composing herself. Harry's just absurd. Consistently, Ron agreed. He came in and sat down and looked at the files spread on the table, and his expression went through several things. Have we got a plan? We've got the beginning of a plan, Harry said. Second year, Ron said. The diary, will deal with that before it can be reintroduced. The chamber, probably mid-year depending on how things develop. The tiara, we already know where it is. Harry paused, and we'll need to figure out who Dumbledore's hired for defense this year. He told you, not directly, but he mentioned in his letter that the position has been filled and that the candidate came recommended by someone he describes as a source I have since learned to trust with reservations. Harry paused. Which means someone who presents as trustworthy and isn't entirely. Ron and Hermione looked at each other. Great, Ron said. Another year of that. Different problems, Harry said. Not the same one. Still problems, though. Yes, Harry said, still problems. Ron looked at the files and the books and the 2 of them at the table in the lamplit kitchen with the sleeping house around them, and something in his face settled into the particular Ron expression that Harry had come to recognize as his version of commitment, not dramatic, not announced, just a quality of being present and decided. Right, Ron said. Move over, I'm reading the file. Hermione passed it to him without comment, which was its own form of trust. The night before the Hogwarts Express, Harry sat on the roof of the burrow. He'd found the access hatch 2 weeks in and had made a habit of coming up here in the late evenings when the house had quieted. The roof was uneven and warm from the day's sun, and the sky above the Ottery St. Catchpole countryside was an extraordinary depth of dark blue, the kind of sky you only got well away from city light, showing stars with the simple abundance of something that had been doing this long before anyone was watching. The black scale sat balanced on his knee. He was thinking about his father's words, when the dead can hear you clearly, and they will answer. He'd been testing the edges of it this summer. Carefully, methodically, the way he approached everything he was learning about himself. The voices of the souls were clearer now than they had been in May. Not words yet, but direction, a quality of presence, the sense of being heard. When he sat very still and let his attention go to that frequency, he could feel them the way you feel whether approaching, not the specifics, but the fact of it and the number of them and the long, patient wait of their waiting. There were many, more than the ones tied to Horcruxes. All the ones Voldemort had taken in 40 years of systematic murder and terror. The ones lost in the First War. The ones whose deaths had been the price of other people's power. They didn't speak, not yet, but they attended, and the attention had a quality that was almost recognition. He was getting there. He heard the hatch open behind him and Ginny came up carefully, picking her way across the uneven tiles with the balance of someone who'd done this before. She sat down a few feet away and looked at the sky. They sat in comfortable silence for a minute. I looked some things up, Ginny said. About Anubis, Harry looked at her. Ron told me. Well, Ron told me because I pestered him until he did, so if he gets in trouble for it, that's on me. She glanced at Harry sideways. Is it true? That's what you are. Yes, Harry said. Ginny looked at the sky. She had the thoughtful quality she sometimes had underneath the shyness, the quality that suggested she was actually processing things at a level her 11-year-old exterior didn't always show. The weighing of the heart, she said. Anubis weighs the heart against the feather of truth. If the heart is lighter than the feather, the soul passes through. She paused. And if it's not, it gets eaten, Harry said, by a creature called Amit. Lion, hippopotamus, crocodile. That's quite final. It's supposed to be. Ginny was quiet for a moment. Do you do the weighing? Not yet, Harry said. I don't think I'm old enough to hold that authority fully. It's something I'm growing into. He paused. But I can feel when someone's heart is heavy, when someone's carrying something wrong. The diary, he glanced at her, felt like a heart fed on fear and hatred until those were the only things in it. Ginny looked at her hands. What does mine feel like? Harry looked at her. Like someone who's angry at the right things, he said, and a lot braver than she gives herself credit for. Ginny was quiet for a long time after that, not uncomfortable. The quality of the silence was thinking, not hurting. Eventually she said, Will you find them all, the Horcruxes? Yes, and then the war ends, Harry said with the simple certainty of someone stating a fact about a thing that hasn't happened yet but absolutely will. And then we build something better because there'll be a lot of people who have spent years just surviving and they'll deserve more than surviving. Ginny looked at him. You've thought about what comes after. I think about everything. She looked back at the sky. Most people who talk about winning don't think about what comes after. Most people are thinking about the fight, Harry said. I'm thinking about the balance. They sat on the roof under the stars, and the night was warm and quiet, and far below in the fields, a fox moved through the long grass and stopped and looked up at the roof for a long moment with the bright, attentive eyes that animals turned on Harry, and then moved on. September 1st arrived with the organized chaos that the Weasley household approached all deadlines. The station platform was noise and steam, and the specific social turbulence of hundreds of families in the same transitional moment. Harry moved through it with his trunk and with Hedwig in her cage and with Ron on his left talking to his mother and Ginny on his right being hugged repeatedly by Molly, and Hermione appearing through the crowd with her parents, a tall man and a tall woman, both with Hermione's particular quality of focused intelligence, who shook Harry's hand and said things about having heard a great deal about him, which Hermione received with the expression of someone who had not told them a great deal and suspected her parents of social improvisation. Arthur was looking at the train with open delight. Entirely steam-powered, he said to Harry as if sharing an intimate joy, or it appears to be. But the mechanisms that actually move it are fascinating. The Muggle interface is quite convincing. Would you like a closer look at the engine? Harry said. Arthur looked at him with the expression of a man who has been offered exactly what he wants and is checking that he's understood correctly. Could I? I'll tell them you're a railway enthusiast, Harry said, which is technically true. Arthur made a sound of genuine delight, and they walked toward the engine, and Harry spent 10 minutes watching Arthur Weasley examine the controls with the focused joy of someone encountering wonder in their area of deepest interest. And it was one of the best 10 minutes of the summer, and he filed it in the place where he kept things worth keeping. On the train, door slid shut, countryside beginning its pull past the window. Ron and Hermione and Harry in their compartment with the easy geometry of people who have established where they fit in relation to each other. Hermione opened her notebook to the section on second-year objectives, and Ron produced food from his bag, and Harry looked out the window at the beginning of England unspooling. Same seats, Ron said. Full circle. Not full, Hermione said. A year is a spiral. You end up at the same point on the face of the clock, but you're higher up. Ron thought about this. That's either very profound or it's both, Harry said. Ron nodded. Yeah, it is. The train gathered speed, and the suburbs thinned into fields, and the fields spread into the particular quality of English countryside in early September. Everything still green, but with the first suggestion of change at the edges. And Harry turned the black scale in his fingers and felt the year ahead the way you feel weather, the shape and direction of it, the pressure building in specific places. The diary in his bag, waiting for the venom that would undo it. The chamber below the school, the old basilisk in its dark, the soul of Tom Riddle's first murder sealed in the place where it happened. The tiara in the room of hidden things, the list of what remained. And further ahead past the immediate things, the cave with the locket, the cup wherever it was hidden, the unknown sixth, the snake, each one a soul held captive, each one a weight on the wrong side of the scales. He would find them all. He would take the long road through them, careful, complete, every step chosen, and he would learn what he was becoming with each year. And the voices of the dead would become clearer, and the authority of his inheritance would settle into him the way a river settles into its bed, not all at once, but with the patient certainty of things that are following their nature. And at the end of it, the thing his father had not said and did not need to say, the thing that was simply true the way a mathematical conclusion is simply true when you have all the variables. At the end of it, when the last Horcrux fell and Voldemort stood before him with nowhere left to run and no more fragments left to hide behind, Harry would look at him the way he had looked at the wraith in the chamber, with the full weight of what he was, and the scales would balance. He thought about that briefly, the moment not yet imagined in detail but felt in outline, the way you feel the end of a piece of music before it arrives, the last note inevitable from the first. He thought about the souls he hadn't yet been able to hear clearly, the chorus at the edges of the vast dark space, 50 years of waiting for a wrong to be righted. He thought about his mother, the brightest soul in 400 years, who had loved a god honestly and raised her son in the 11 months she had, and who was somewhere on the other side of the threshold, not waiting anxiously but present, the way the dead are present to the ones who carry them. He thought about his father's voice, vast and resonant and very dry, and the pride that didn't require expression because it was simply present. "What are you thinking?" Hermione said. Harry turned from the window. She was watching him over her notebook with the focused question that meant she actually wanted to know. About balance, Harry said, and that we'll get there. He looked at the two of them, Ron with a sandwich halfway to his mouth and the easy open face of someone who had decided a long time ago to walk toward difficult things rather than away from them. Hermione with her pencil and her notebook and her enormous practical intelligence and the quality that had brought her down through the trapdoor on a Tuesday night in February without being asked. We'll get there, he said again. Ron bit into his sandwich. Obviously, he said around it. Hermione looked at Harry for a moment longer, reading something in his face that she seemed to find sufficient, and then looked back at her notebook and wrote something at the top of a new page. Year 2 objectives. The train moved north. The countryside moved past. The black scale in Harry's pocket was warm and perfectly balanced, tipping not with uncertainty, but with the readiness of something that knew the measure of what it would be asked to hold and was prepared to hold it. Outside, somewhere over the hills, a hawk rode a thermal high and still and very certain in the blue September air. Below it, the world turned. The scales balanced.